Chapter 657. Huh? Dragon Tribe Driver Legolas? Who is that? Why does it sound so familiar? Duque's first reaction was to be dumbfounded. His second reaction was F***ck. Kazak's shadow arrow rain that covered his entire field of vision was coming. It was not a good feeling. It was as if he was tied to a cross and could not move at all, while the other party tossed a black, poisonous sea urchin at his face. The sound of death that rang in his ears made his scalp go numb. Hide behind me. Muradin attempted to use his massive body to block in front of him, creating a path of survival for the adventurer team. However, his actions were stopped by the Eridar twins at the same time, and he was forcefully held back. At the critical moment, a teleportation gate suddenly opened beside Duque. An extremely healthy and fair thigh appeared in front of Duque. Unlike the slender thighs of the Windrunner sisters, this thigh was thicker than an elf's due to the protruding buttocks at the base of this thigh. This did not mean that this thigh was ugly. Instead, starting from the thigh, the entire thigh began to become streamlined. This was a very mature and beautiful thigh. Duque recognized this thigh. Ugh! In the next moment, what appeared in Duque's vision was a muscular arm with biceps clearly visible. Even though it was as fair as Aurelia's, it was even more muscular and beautiful than the Windrunner sisters' arms. It was not the kind of muscles that bulged exaggeratedly, but it had the beauty of a bodybuilder. It was just this one hand that was raised lightly. A translucent illusory red dragon wing replaced the rising red curtain, firmly blocking the entire stage. Phew! 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 Even the raindrops falling on the pond did not count. The storm-like shadow arrow rain did not even cause a ripple on the illusory dragon wing. It was a collision that was even more exaggerated than an egg hitting a rock. The seemingly domineering shadow arrow rain shattered upon colliding with the illusory dragon wing. In the blink of an eye, all of them disappeared without a trace. That's right. Low-tier mysteries were meaningless in front of high-level mysteries. Kazak's outstretched demon claw froze in mid-air, completely forgetting to retract it. On the ugly face of the demon, a pair of scarlet eyes bulged out, filled with disbelief. Kazak could faintly feel a terrifying power that completely surpassed him from that petite and almost negligible body. This woman who suddenly appeared. Who was she? On the other side, the Eridar twins panicked and leaped back 3 times in a row. They widened the distance between them and Muradin. No, more accurately, they widened the distance between them and the red-haired woman who just came out. The heroes of the adventurer team also looked at the great god who had suddenly appeared in shock. Yo! I'm coming! The bright red-haired woman greeted Duque, making people feel that there was a huge, erect dog tail wagging behind her butt. Her face was full of "praise me. Hurry up and praise me" expression. Duque gulped. Oh, Alexstrasza, why are you here? I remember that my temporary guardian authority can only reach up to the ancient dragons at most. Isn't the Red Dragon Army the most particular about rules? Yes. But if the demon invading Azeroth is too strong, wouldn't it be natural to send in the dragon aspect? Alexstrasza lied through her teeth. Normally, unless the Burning Legion's Big Three came personally, it would not be her turn to act according to the rules. Moreover, didn't you pay an extra price? I heard that mages are very particular about equivalent exchange. Actually, the Red Dragon Army is similar. Huh? Extra price. At this moment, Duque was a little confused. Hey, that DOS ice cream, remember to give it to me later. You must remember it. The queen's golden eyes clearly showed a strange determination. Pfft. Duque could not help but spit. Oh. Your Majesty the Queen. Didn't you notice that you revealed your true nature as a foodie? At this time, just smile. Ha. Ha ha ha. Damn, using an ice cream to exchange for the Red Dragon Queen's help, what the hell? Even though the price Duque was about to pay was probably equivalent to a few dozen RMB before he transmigrated, the queen did not hesitate at all. Ha! A soft, thunderous roar came from the flaming red lips. It was a sharp howl mixed with the power of a dragon. The deafening sound that should have pierced the eardrums of the mortals nearby was completely restrained by the Red Dragon Queen's extraordinary control. It was like a venomous snake's tongue, striking out like lightning. In the ears of the bystanders, it was just a slightly loud shout. But in that instant, the Eridar twins' incarnations were completely disintegrated into spiritual particles by the sound wave and dissipated in the wind. Unexpectedly, Romeo and Juliet, who were supposed to be bosses, did not disappear on the spot. Instead, they broke free from their possession and shouted their last lines. Romeo shouted, "You killed me, and you're so proud." Juliet said, "Ah. Good knife, this is your scabbard. Stab it and let me die." In the end, the two fell dead. Duque was speechless. Spectators from 2 to 9 were speechless. On the other side, Kazakh felt that something was wrong. Even at his peak, he might not be able to withstand Alexstrasza's attack. Furthermore, he only came with half of his body. Because of the spatial barrier, he only had half of his strength. The Eridar twins were just projections. Their deaths were not to be regretted. Even if they were killed by the Queen's sound wave, they would at most lose a few % of their souls. He, Kazakh, had come in person. At this moment, Kazakh wanted to cry himself to death in the toilet. "Ah!" As he shouted, Kazakh made his last struggle. The sword in his hand that was more than 10 meters long drew a cold arc in the air. He used all his strength to slash at the Red Dragon Queen in the middle of the stage. Humph! Disdain flowed out of her golden eyes. She walked forward casually, feeling completely defenseless. Her steps were so light that it seemed like she was going for a picnic. It was not like a warrior's footsteps at all. Kazakh almost couldn't help but laugh. For the first time, he saw the light of victory. Yes, dragons were indeed powerful creatures. Their bodies were also top-notch. The Red Dragon Queen's almost limitless healing ability was also very overpowered. But, so what? Kazakh laughed maniacally in his mind. Fool! How much strength can you use in your human form? I, Kazakh, will be taking the head of the life-giver Alexstrasza. Kazakh left this sentence in his mind and attacked with all his might. The sword, which was already faster than a mortal's dynamic vision, actually burst out with a short but powerful aura and exploded with a second acceleration. The sword cut through the void and slashed at the queen's neck. At this moment, Alexstrasza suddenly said, "My ice cream." Chapter 658. Ice cream? What's that? Has the famous Red Dragon Queen gone mad? Kazakh's face showed a hint of mockery. Demons were very realistic and would not be soft-hearted just because the other party revealed a flaw. No one expected that the speed that was already at the peak of the peak could be accelerated a third time. If one had to describe the speed before this move, it would be lightning. When one saw the light, one's head would already be struck by lightning. However, after 3 times of acceleration, one's perception was almost in the realm of spatial folding. This attack speed, even Duque, who had absolute confidence in the Red Dragon Queen, could not help but be shaken at this moment. Be it demons or dragons, they were all races with outstanding talent. Success was 99% sweat and 1% genius. In fact, there were many beings who were willing to give up the 99%, but most of them lacked the 1%. Those who had the 1% were already envied and hated by others. Yet, this fellow was willing to put in 10 times the effort of a mortal. Kazakh's sword was just that fast. Whether it was the angle, the strength of the force, or the perfection of the demonic power, everything was impeccable. This was no longer a simple talent. Without millions of practice, it was impossible to have the power to step into the realm of the extraordinary. Ha! I'm going to kill Alexstrasza. Kazakh was very sure. Unfortunately, what happened next made this great demon, who had experienced countless battles, dumbfounded. If Alexstrasza used the advantage of her petite body to dodge at the last moment, causing the sharp slash of the beheader's sword to miss. If that was the case, perhaps he could admit that he had underestimated the agility of the dragon aspect in human form. But, the Red Dragon Queen only raised 2 fingers. Yes. She used the tips of the slightly sharpened scarlet nails on her index and middle fingers to easily catch Kazak's terrifying attack that seemed to transcend space. Just by looking, it was obvious that this terrifying giant sword was more than 10 meters long and weighed in the unit of tons. However, the queen seemed to be picking up a fallen flower petal, so gentle and satisfied. Kazak's huge body, which was several stories tall, and the queen's standard human body, staged the greatest irony on the stage of this Karlahim theater. It felt as if the air, no, the entire space-time had been completely frozen by this attack. Kazak wasn't the only one who was desperately trying to inhale air into his lungs. Duque and the others were doing the same. How is this possible? It was very interesting. Both sides let out the same cry of surprise. Soon after, the team of adventurers started to pant so low that it was almost inaudible. At this time, the Red Dragon Queen emphasized, "I want it today." "What do you want?" Even Duque, as the person involved, took a full 3 seconds to realize that this was connected to the previous, "my ice cream." This foodie actually said, "I want the ice cream today." Duque pointed at Kazak in annoyance. "The faster you get rid of this guy, the more time I have to get your ice cream." Even though Duque was clearly talking and laughing with the queen, Kazak was deeply afraid of the unparalleled sense of control that Duque and the queen exuded during their conversation. The queen's eyes moved, and the aura that burst forth from her gaze seemed to make this big demon feel as if the sky and earth were collapsing. Yes. Whether it was the sky or the earth, it was all on his side that was collapsing. The surrounding temperature suddenly rose by more than 20 degrees. Even the air was buzzing, as if some invisible, mysterious power was rippling through the entire theater. The next moment, Kacha! A crack suddenly appeared on the portal around Kazak's waist. Immediately, an illusory dragon head appeared right above Kazak's body. The vanguard and commander of the Burning Legion could only watch in despair as the translucent dragon head suddenly spat out a terrifying dragon's breath of over 10,000 degrees. Whoosh. The dragon's breath that could burn everything turned into a huge pillar of fire and poured down on Kazak's head. There were no splashes of flames, and there was no magma. Under the extraordinary control, every drop of dragon's breath that tried to leave the range of the fire pillar was pulled back and continued to burn the body of this big demon. On the huge body that was several stories high, the hard skin of the demon was quickly decomposed by the high temperature. The strong muscles rapidly withered, and the strong bones were charred black at a speed visible to the naked eye. In less than 5 seconds, this big demon that could turn the whole of Karazhan upside down, was dead. Alexstrasza suddenly frowned. What? Damn, most of this guy's soul did not pass through the portal. He escaped. The queen spat angrily. Duque did not care too much. That's right. Demons are all like this. They seem very fierce. In reality, they are more afraid of death than anyone else. Duque's conclusion caused the people around him to burst into laughter. The queen raised her hand, and a huge translucent dragon claw appeared in midair. It grabbed Kazak's remains and pulled the entire demon corpse out of the portal for her. After Kazak's huge body went through the baptism of incineration, all that was left were useless ashes and a pile of Kazak's treasures. Duque, do you want it? The queen did not care about these things, so naturally, Duque took advantage of it. Yes. Why not? It's only fair to kill the enemy and take the spoils of war. Defeating the boss without looting the corpse. That was a crime in every sense of the word. I'm committing a crime. Even though Duque was recognized as a black hand in the game in his previous life, he would not give up on looting the corpse. As for the Black Hand, one had to have the ability to defeat the boss to be qualified to be a Black Hand. If you don't let me lead the group, you won't even have the chance to see the Black Hand looting the corpse. Humph humph humph. The evil Duque firmly defended his Black Hand actions in the game. An icicle spell swept up a small tornado and cooled down the high-temperature ashes at the same time. The excited Duque quickly used the magician's hand to take out a staff with a head that looked like a small drum and 4 strange feathers. Duque tossed it to Ronan. Amber seal, perfect for you. Thank you, teacher. Ronan accepted it happily. Duke gave a one-handed hammer called Skybreaker to Muradin and the 2 holy knights to discuss how to split it. He then gave the cloak, Escadar's fur, to the Windrunner sisters, and finally gave a pair of gloves called Leather of Bad Luck to Edwin. Finally, he found what he wanted the most, Shadow Eye. Chapter 659. Although the shadowy eye was theoretically something that Kazak would drop, theory was theory. Even his Karazhan had been ambushed by a demon. Perhaps Kazak's transport captain was so stupid that he didn't bring it with him? Seeing how Duque was so interested in this palm-sized, darkness-shrouded, and seemingly moving eyeball, if Duque wasn't a hero of the Alliance, standing at the forefront of the fight against evil, anyone would think that Duque was a sorcerer who had fallen into evil ways. Aurelia wanted to say something but stopped. For the sake of Duque's image, she didn't choose to ask on the spot. She even secretly pulled her 2 curious sisters aside. But while she could hold back, guys like Muradin couldn't. He opened his big mouth and said, "Hey, Duque, what do you want this thing for? I don't think it's good. Do you want a paladin to hammer it?" Gavin Rad was curious. He was sure that Duque must have an explanation. But Tyrion stepped forward without hesitation. Duque smiled. The shadowy eye is certainly not a good thing, but I want to remind everyone that in the future, there will be another thing called the Holy Eye appearing in this world. When they were combined, there would be a chance to obtain a blessing staff. This would be a great and noble staff. If you don't trust me, I can temporarily seal this shadowy eye in the Holy Light Church in Stormwind. The Holy Light will not betray your trust, Your Excellency. Benedetta smiled and nodded. When everyone heard this, they immediately felt relieved. Intentionally or unintentionally, Duque glanced past the Bishop of Stormwind, Benedetta's. The blessing staff, the most sacred thing in a priest's heart. Even as the years passed and people changed, many priests still placed such a special epic staff in the corner of their warehouse. It was the best wish and memory of a generation of priests. But Duque knew Benedetta's background. The blessing staff was a sacred treasure, and Duque would not give it to this guy. On the other side, the battle between the 2 bosses continued. Duque had everyone help the Virgin Mary deal with the Void Nether Dragon, but he and the Red Dragon Queen didn't move. Duque, you're not going. Everyone was a little puzzled. Duque's smile gave people a sense of absolute confidence. I won't be going. If I or Her Majesty Alexstrasza takes action, it will be over in an instant. In the future, everyone might have to face all kinds of powerful enemies with strange abilities. This is a rare opportunity to train. Everyone, please use your wisdom and courage to deal with this Nether Void Dragon. Ah. Yes, please replace Ms. Christine first. With her help, it's meaningless. What was being pretentious? This was what it meant to be cool. There was nothing more to say about the boss's demeanor of not needing him to do anything for such a small matter. It didn't feel like Duque was a young man at all. Instead, it felt like he was on the same level as the Red Dragon Queen. As the guardian of Azeroth, he had protected this world for thousands of years. He was the kind of powerful existence that could suppress all gods and demons with a wave of his hand. Okay, he was cool for 3 seconds. When Aurelia asked, Duque, what are you going to do now? Duque had a strange expression. I need to discuss the importance of morale with Her Majesty. Everyone suddenly remembered the ice cream that the Queen had been emphasizing. Damn, it was all to get food to please the Queen. Everyone was speechless. There was nothing they could do. Who told Duque to be the boss? Everyone understood the significance of the Karazhan spatial node in protecting the world of Azeroth. That big demon called Kazakh was not someone they could deal with. If they couldn't deal with the big demon, they could deal with the small ones. These world-famous heroes of the later generations were now hired by Dukla to work for him. The queen put her hands on her hips and waited for everyone to leave the stage. Almost as soon as everyone left, the queen's face changed. A foodie's face. The queen almost turned into a husky wagging her tail. Hey, Duque, is that Haagen-Dazs ice cream delicious? I only realized that the dragon's cooking skills are terrible when I became a human a while ago. Ah, humans and high elves are magical races that really know how to enjoy themselves. Duque was speechless. The queen shook Duque's arm, almost shaking Duque's small body. Forget about those idiots who only know how to eat their prey raw for tens of thousands of years. Even that kid Cleistras is not kind. He clearly tasted a lot of delicious food in the Dalajan, but he refused to give it to me even once. Cleistras was Krasis, right? Hey! Legend has it that Krasis is secretly in love with you. Just because I don't give you delicious food, you erase his love for you. Krasis, did I do something to make you despair? Duque's heart was trembling. It seemed that he had broken up another historical couple. Why did he use the word again? Well, anyway, Duque was from the Lovers Go to Die group. Even if he was now a traitor to the Singles Alliance, Duque decided not to care about it. Unexpectedly, the queen kept on chattering. When I was Legolas, I heard a piece of news. The best seasoning in the whole of Lordaeron comes from you. I didn't expect you to be a gourmet supplier. Yes. If I could travel back in time, I would definitely write a book called The Gourmet Supplier and dominate the Dian Yang website in 2016. What a joke. Only Duque himself knew that it was not that his cooking skills were good enough, but that the food and seasoning methods in this world were too lousy. Even the white bread that was considered superior by the world was worlds apart from the bread that was fermented with yeast, bulking agents, and additives before Duque traveled through time. Because of transportation, salt was not available in many places. There was no butter, no peanut butter, and they had to eat dry, tasteless bread every day. Duque was too lazy to complain about all kinds of terrible things. At that moment, Duque became the master of China. At that moment, Duque became the god of cooking in the spirit of the halberd eaters. The best actor Duque looked at the queen with a sacred aura and said solemnly, "True delicacies of the world need time, love, and creativity to polish them. Things made in haste will never be perfect. Alexstrasza, do you trust me?" The queen quickly nodded like a chick pecking at rice. "Give me 3 days. I will make Haagen-Dazs ice cream that will satisfy you." Duque mourned in his heart. "Sorry. Haagen-Dazs, Duque, may ruin your brand." Chapter 660. Logically speaking, there was a reason for everything's success. So big that humans dominated the earth. So small that the success of Haagen-Dazs ice cream. Although Duque always felt that Haagen-Dazs was too sweet, many people in his previous world would easily think of it when they thought of the best ice cream. Of course, it was impossible for a half-transmigrator like Duque to make an identical ice cream under the Haagen-Dazs brand. Duque's biggest advantage was that no one in Azeroth had ever eaten an authentic Haagen-Dazs. If this wasn't a war-torn world, Duque was absolutely sure that he could become the richest person in this world with just his transmigrator knowledge. Don't ask why Duque knew how to make ice cream. Forget that there were no female creatures in the Temple of the University of Technology. There was only one small shop within 3 kilometers of the university. Not only did they sell pineapple beer, they even dared to refreeze the melted ice cream after the power was cut off. In a fit of anger, Duque and the other animals didn't have ice cream to make themselves. So they remembered it. Don't ask why they ate ice cream in the middle of winter. Didn't they see that the person who was drooling over it was actually a super female dragon? Her stomach was full of stomach fire. Dragon breath. How could it not be hot? That wasn't a problem at all. And the insidious Duque, in order to maximize the effect of nothing, had specially carried out a contrast battle. So, while the 9 heroes of the Alliance fought to the death downstairs, Duque and Alexstrasza slipped to the rooftop of Karazhan to make food. After a few teleportations, Duque got what he wanted. After Prince Malchezer knelt, the rooftop of Karazhan was empty. The queen sat cross-legged on the fence, looking left and right, smelling the increasingly rich fragrance in the air. She was so moved that she was about to cry. On the left was a whole roast cow. The red dragon had eaten roast beef quite a bit. Duque's method was more authentic. After removing the internal organs and peeling off the skin, Duque used hands of magic to fix the cow's body on a special iron frame and then put various spices into the cow's body. Well, ever since he made mustard, Duque had invested at least 100,000 gold coins in seasoning. He didn't have cumin anymore, but he still found a lot of similar things. He spread the seasoning paste evenly over the cow's body and used only a dozen hands of magic to carry the iron frame to a special pit for roasting the cow. The pit that was specially made for roasting the whole cow looked like a tin can. It was built with bricks and was about 4 meters long, 2 meters wide, and 2 meters deep. The cow was placed in the pit, and at the bottom of the pit was a blazing charcoal fire. As long as the beef was roasted over a charcoal fire for a few hours, the color of the beef would slowly turn golden. The golden color signified a bountiful harvest, which meant that the whole beef was cooked. Duke had asked Alexstrasza if she could wait. The queen said, "It's fine. I have plenty of time." For a dragon that had lived for more than 20,000 years, what she lacked most wasn't time, but new things. Duque suddenly realized that the gadgets he brought from Earth that couldn't be found in this world could be very attractive to these guys who had almost infinite lives. Fine. The food supplier, Duque, went back to work. Since it was fake Häagen-Dazs ice cream, simple ice cream couldn't satisfy the queen, or to be more precise, Duque's appetite. What Duque was going to make was red bean ice cream. He asked the system elf to pick out the impurities in the red beans with hands of magic and rinse the pebbles. Soak the red beans in cold water for 1 hour, add water, and cook the red beans using the method of boiling the water 3 times and braising 3 times, boil the water 3 times, then turn off the heat and simmer for half an hour, repeat 3 times. At the same time, he broke the eggs into a small basin. He couldn't find a beater in a hurry, but it wasn't a problem for Duque. He simply rotated the hands of magic in the basin at a high speed. When the color became slightly lighter, it was a success. While beating the eggs, Duque slowly added milk and sugar and stirred. Duke and Alexstrasza slowly heated it up with a low flame, chatting about trivial matters as they heated and stirred the semi-finished products. When the pot was boiling, Duque added cornflour. Unfortunately, there was no cornstarch in this world. Duque really didn't know how to make it, so he could only replace it with ground cornflour. However, it wouldn't be a problem to fool people, no, dragons. He added the cornflour and stirred it until it was uniform. He heated it again. This time, it was more viscous. He heated it slowly with a low fire and put it into a container. Usually, what followed was a long cool down. Normally, it would take about 4 to 5 hours to freeze. Unfortunately, when Duque saw this dragon queen, who was obviously a glutton, gulping down her saliva every minute, Duque resigned himself to his fate and used magic to improve it. The great radiant moon mage Duque used his unparalleled control of magic to speed up the cooling of the ice cream as much as possible without damaging its quality. It was the same with the roast beef. About half an hour later, when the roast beef and the ice cream were almost done at the same time, Muradin and the other 8 arrived on the roof under Khadgar's lead. Yo! Duque! Those 2 monsters aren't bad. We've learned something new. Muradin's loud voice reached them before he even reached the roof. Oh, my rock ancestor. What is this fragrance? Then, everyone heard a sweet female voice. Hey, Duque, give it to me, can you give it to me? I beg you, Hurry up and give it to me, I can't take it anymore. Any man who heard that sorrowful voice would feel their bones go numb. If it had been anywhere else, Aurelia might have been annoyed. Unfortunately, after smelling that rich fragrance, the Windrunner sisters had fallen. The group of fellows charged forward at the speed of a charge. No, that bastard Muradin used the warrior's charge skill. Mine. Mine. It's all mine. What did dwarves love the most? Delicious food and good wine. Not just that bastard Muradin, even the other heroes who had experienced a tough battle were tempted by the situation before them. Although no one was injured, they had expended a lot of stamina and energy. What could be more surprising than a delicious roast beef and mysterious ice cream after a victory? The group first pounced on the golden roast beef. Then, when they realized that the great red dragon queen was eating the roast beef without a care in the world, she scooped up a spoonful of ice cream. Everyone's expression changed. That's right, roast meat with ice cream was a bit ridiculous, but these country bumpkins in the food desert of Azeroth had never seen it before. Chapter 661. Soldiers who had been on the battlefield knew the value of good food. The hardship of marching was not something that outsiders could understand. Walking in dense forests, if they had enough energy, they could shoot some prey and have a sumptuous meal. When marching to places like the Burning Plains or the Cursed Lands, the experience was enough to make people want to die. It was not that there was no prey, but would anyone dare to eat those monsters that had been corroded by dark energy? Moreover, roasted meat could not possibly be as delicious as Duque's whole roasted cow. What else was there to care about in war? It was already good enough to stay alive. Did they not see that even the crown prince of Kurtalas had died? Other than the Dalajan's pharaoh who could not sleep well, eat well, and would not work if their babies were not happy, the entire alliance, from soldiers to generals, did not care so much. But this did not mean that they had no need for good food. Kings and nobles would carry spices in private. Yes, it was something from Duque's side. At the height of the war, the alliance had a saying about the golden plant. It meant that Duque's spices were more expensive than gold. Of course, it was not because Duque was so expensive, it was because of the unscrupulous merchants. The big shots of the alliance naturally had Duque's supplies, but the nobles below were not so lucky. This was where Duque was smart. Others profited from war and were criticized by everyone, but when Duque made a fortune, no one could complain. Because in terms of armaments, Duque was absolutely selfless and did not skimp. But food and spices were not necessities, right? They were luxury goods, right? Yes, those unscrupulous merchants mentioned above were all secretly Duque's people. You could choose not to buy, no one would force you to buy. It was just that other people ate well and drank spicy food, while you could only eat tasteless white bread. Don't blame other nobles for looking down on you. Faced with spices that were inflated by unscrupulous merchants, good nobles would cry and dig into their wallets. After fighting a big war against the beast men, the nobles' wallets had shrunk, except for Duque. As for how much money Duque had, he did not know. After 10 million, Duque stopped counting. Alright, I'll set a small goal. Before Zol arrives, I'll earn 100 million from him first. At this time, because Karazhan had isolated part of the space, there was no cold wind blowing in, so it became a very pleasant thing. The group of heroes ate barbecued meat, drank wine, and looked at the beauties eating ice cream in the middle of the ice and snow. Actually, Duque's ice cream wasn't that amazing. According to his standards, it was about 60% of the original version. The fragrance of the milk was enough, and the taste of the red beans was also not bad. The white sugar added was not refined enough, but it was still passable. The biggest difference was the smoothness of the ice cream. The enjoyment of top-notch ice cream wasn't something that Duque's imitation could compare to. However, the ladies didn't know. They only knew that the snow that they had seen a lot of could also become a delicacy after being condensed. One by one, the top beauties in Azeroth stretched out their soft lilac tongues and licked the ice cream without being taught. The scene was really pleasing to the eye. Accompanied by the white, half-melted ice cream, the seductive little tongue faintly swam between their bright red lips. Because even Alexstrasza's human form was based on the template of the high elves, everyone saw the four elven beauties squinting their long and charming phoenix eyes, stretching their eyebrows that were longer than humans, and enjoying the delicacy. If they didn't know that this had nothing to do with flirting, anyone would mistake it for some kind of temptation or invitation. The men weren't too interested in ice cream. They recognized it as a delicacy, but they were more interested in the roast beef. Muradin and the two paladins were eating meat and drinking wine, while Benedettas chatted with Theon from time to time. Edwin and Ronan were both Duque's subordinates, and the two tactfully went to the side to chat. Only Duque, the three Windrunner sisters, and the Red Dragon Queen were left together. Duque didn't have that many scruples. One was the golden thigh of the dragons that he had to maintain a good relationship with, two were his own women, and Servanas, who was both his sister-in-law and sister-in-law. Duque didn't mind. Unlike the foodie Alexstrasza, Aurelia seemed to be a bit upset that Duque didn't bring out such delicious food earlier. When it came to food, Aurelia gave in to the queen, but her words made the queen choke. "It's fine, your majesty, eat more. I'm by Duque's side anyway. When we sisters want it, Duque can make it for us." The queen's eyes were plaintive. Sasha, on the other hand, didn't pay any attention. Seeing Duque looking at her, Sasha returned a slightly seductive look. She glanced at Duque in a seemingly calm but flirtatious manner, then gently licked the ice cream on her seductive red lips. She narrowed her eyes slightly and began to concentrate on melting the ice cream in her mouth bit by bit. Servanas was extremely conflicted. She looked at Duque, who was both her brother-in-law and her brother-in-law. He wasn't particularly good at fighting, but every time he did something earth-shattering. At the age of 17, he led the entire alliance and won one great battle after another. Not long after he killed Nesario, he came to borrow the Red Dragon Queen's hand to kill a greater demon. If she really wanted to choose a man who was not inferior to Duque, she really couldn't find one. However, as the most rebellious of the Windrunner sisters, Servanas was disdainful of her third sister's private proposal to get close to Duque. I'd rather be single than make do. This ha-something root ice cream is really delicious. On the other side, the queen had already turned her resentment into appetite. Or perhaps, her taste buds had already been destroyed by the terrible taste of raw meat and tasteless barbecue for 10,000 years. She was already overjoyed when she sneaked into Rotterdam last time. Now that she was eating this delicious food, she was so happy that she cried. Woo-woo. It's so delicious. I've lived for more than 20,000 years, and this is the first time I've eaten something so delicious. Woo-woo, the queen had actually learned the master-level ice cream eating godly skill. It wasn't just her exquisite ice cream eating skills, but also the intoxicated expression on her face as if she was about to orgasm. It gave Duque a strange sense of comfort. Perhaps every chef hoped that their customers could truly enjoy the fruits of their labor. This wasn't some kind of acting. Duque had once seen a set of Spirit of Drugs, Spirit of Halberd Eating, manga. The women in it would feel numb all over when they ate something delicious. At that time, Duque thought it was exaggerated. He didn't think that he would actually see it in real life now. This wasn't acting. The intoxicated expression of the beauties in front of him was the truest reflection of their feelings. Suddenly, a system notification appeared. Congratulations, host. Your reputation in the Dragon Slumber Shrine is now, worship. Chapter 662. There was a question mark on Duque's head that no one else could see. Duque's face was full of confusion. In the game, players had to spend a lot of time to earn a reputation for any force. Regardless of whether it was convenient or not, at least a lot of time had to be invested. Comparisons were odious indeed. If his friends back on Earth knew that he had bribed Alexstrasza with a box of ice cream and a whole roast cow, who knew if they would curse at him? There was actually a premise for this, and that was that Duque had personally rescued Alexstrasza from Nisario's plot and assisted the 4 dragon kings in killing Nisario. This was the real unbreakable cornerstone of the relationship between the two sides. As for the ice cream, it was just a small prelude. The dragon's sleeping temple was the first extraordinary force that had a reputation of worship after Duque came to the world of Azeroth, and it had epoch-making significance for Duque. Reputation in the game was more of a naked benefit, such as being able to exchange for better equipment. Reputation in the real world represented the degree of support the force had for Duque. Looking at the system prompt, his guardian authority had become, in the guardian battle, you can specify an unlimited number of ancient red dragons to fight together as needed. The blue dragons, green dragons, and bronze dragons will definitely respond to your reasonable call. Duque began to understand the significance of the reputation of worship. Reputation of worship meant that the force had already sacrificed themselves for him without any hesitation. Just like before, after the reputation of worship, in Stormwind City, Lang did not even mind Duque drawing out the territory of Stormwind to establish his own country. The soldiers and people were willing to share half with Duque. What's more, after Duque made it clear that he only wanted to be a Grand Duke and guard the borders of Stormwind and Azeroth, Lang was even more willing to contribute money and strength. If he could give a gold coin, he would never be short of anything. It was the same for the Dragon's Sleeping Temple now. As long as the Dragon's Sleeping Temple identified a force as the enemy of Azeroth, they would definitely be able to attract the Dragon Clan's reinforcements. Looking at the other forces, Duque suddenly felt that he was doing quite well in Azeroth. The ones that accumulated worship were Stormwind City, Iron Furnace Fort, Rapid Stream Fort, and Dragon's Slumber Temple. Reverence, Kull, Tiras, Nomarigan, and Eagle Nest Mountain. The other kingdoms were basically respectful. Only Rotterdam and Kuel Salis were indifferent. Lordaeron was defeated because Duque had repeatedly slapped Turinas in the face. As for Kuel Salis, Duque had poached his 3 strongest ranger generals. Kuel Salis was already giving Kuel Salis face by not falling out with Duque. Duque only had one question at the moment. Was the Calamity Troop an enemy in the eyes of the Dragon Tribe? When Duque asked about the Queen tilted her head and reluctantly stopped talking. Well, there are rarely any foreign races or fallen humans with demonic powers. Actually, it depends on how dangerous the target is. In our definition, there are only 2 groups of absolute enemies, excluding the fallen Nisario. One is the demons of the Burning Legion, and the other is the most powerful subordinates of the ancient god of Azeroth. Oh. The rest will have to be determined by a meeting. You know, unless it is a very urgent situation, I have the right to order an emergency meeting. Otherwise, it will be very troublesome to wait for those guys who are often asleep or not doing proper work. Alexstrasza shrugged. The next second, she found that a small piece of ice cream had fallen. The Queen stuck out her tongue in an attempt to save the ice cream, but accidentally let the ice cream fall into the Dragon's Valley in her breastplate. Without the restraint that a human lady should have, the Queen actually pinched the ice cream out with 2 fingers and put it back into her mouth. Well, she even sucked on her fingers. Watching the half-melted ice cream drip down the dragon's peak into the deep valley, Duque hurriedly turned his head and silently chanted a spell in his heart. That thing is a dragon. That thing is a dragon. Eating ice cream with barbecued meat was just a small interlude. What made everyone the happiest was that they had foiled another conspiracy of the Burning Legion without any losses on their side. Duque had recovered the entire Karazhan Mage Tower, and the heroes had obtained a lot of epic equipment. For example, Edwin had obtained an epic one-handed sword, Grudge, and a pair of Lurker's leg guards. Benedict had obtained Penance's trousers. Muradin obtained a defense warrior, Amiramus shoulder pads. On average, everyone had obtained 2 pieces of epic equipment that surpassed this point in time. This was a real improvement for the heroes. Even though they had stepped into the realm of heroes, they could not fully unleash the mysterious power contained in these pieces of equipment. This did not hinder them from setting a direction and a benchmark for their efforts. The group returned to Lordaeron that night. When that big-mouthed Muradin spread the news of what had happened in Karazhan, the entire city of Lordaeron seemed to have experienced another major earthquake. Everyone was in an uproar. The demons were here again. So soon. It wasn't that long ago that Sargeras had corrupted and controlled the previous guardian, Medivh. Suddenly, there was another conspiracy against Azeroth. Some of the Ostrich faction had wanted to deny that this was an invasion, thinking that it was a false conspiracy fabricated by Duque. Unfortunately, there were not many people who went to Karazhan this time, but the entire upper echelons of the Alliance were well represented. Apart from the people of Stormwind, there were also heroes from various fields. Magni naturally believed in his younger brother, Muradin. Benedict also represented the Church of Holy Light. Tyrion Fordring's character and his identity as one of the 5 Silver Saints were naturally recognized by the people of Lordaeron and the Paladins. For a moment, Duque was once again pushed to the top of the waves. Compared to the previous time when he had assisted the 4 dragon aspects in killing Nisario, killing the commander of the Burning Legion did not seem to stimulate the people's senses. Only the upper echelons of the Alliance knew the significance of Duque's actions. Just as King Lang was preparing to hold another celebratory dinner for Duque, a piece of news made the warm atmosphere in the entire city of Lordaeron disappear without a trace. Wuther came to the state guesthouse in Stormwind. After seeing Duque, Lang, and Anduin, he immediately said, "The Archbishop of the Holy Light, His Excellency Alonso's Fail, is critically ill. Before he dies, he wishes to see the 3 of you, especially His Excellency Marcus." Duque and Lang were stunned. They froze in their chairs. Anduin, who had the best relationship with Alonso's, stood up in an instant and clenched his fists. This man, who had experienced the pain of the subjugation of his country and the death of his comrades in battle, and who had been fighting on the front lines against the tribes from the beginning to the end, cried openly for the first time. Tears uncontrollably rolled down his determined and masculine face. When did this happen? Why didn't we receive any news at all? Chapter 663. Holy Light Cathedral of Lordaeron. When the orcs invaded the city, the cathedral was lucky enough to escape the flames of war. When the Deathwing almost destroyed the palace, the Holy Light still protected the cathedral. People often said that the glory of the Holy Light would allow the cathedral and the Church of Holy Light to avoid disaster. This time, it seemed that the Church of Holy Light had used up all of its resources. Outside the pure white cathedral, every member of the clergy was in a hurry, and their faces were filled with sorrow. Even the white outer tower of the cathedral seemed to be covered in a layer of shadow. After a few major incidents, almost all the other countries of the Alliance wanted to see the people of Lordaeron suffer. Alonso's Fail was not one of them. He was different from Tirina's, who looked righteous on the surface, but was actually a hypocrite who kept scheming for the benefit of his country. Alonso's was a true and selfless saint. A long time ago in the Dalajan, a Lordaeron missionary threw a copper coin into the fountain and made a wish. "I hope that one day I can spread the way of the Holy Light to the people and teach them the meaning of the 3 great virtues." Before the orcs invaded, Alonso's had been doing this. He preached throughout the entire Eastern Kingdom, spreading the light of hope to the 7 human kingdoms. In every country, in every city, he built a Church of Holy Light, spreading the virtues, calling on people to take care of orphans who had lost their parents, calling on every sinner, and trying to pull everyone onto the path of good. When the War of the Dark Portal started, he was the first to call on all the countries to accept the refugees from Stormwind. He was also the one who mobilized the entire Church of Holy Light to continue supporting the frontline during the fiercest times of the war. He was the one who comforted the people and gave them confidence and courage. And after the war, he was also the first to stand up and call on the wealthy families and nobles who had surplus funds to donate to the restoration of the Stormwind Kingdom and the Stormguard Kingdom that had been destroyed in the war. In order to fight against evil, he ran around and gave speeches. In order to promote justice, he created the great profession of Paladin. In order to revive the human race, he worked hard for the revival of the other countries without rest. He was a truly noble person. If Tyrrhena's shamed the people of Lordaeron, then Alonso's was the key to making the people of Lordaeron great again. The kings of the Alliance could ignore Tyrrhena's, but Alonso's was a truly kind and noble old man, so the kings would always give him their utmost support. But now, without any warning, Alonso's had collapsed. At this time, almost all the kings who were still in Rotterdam gathered in the cathedral. The kings who had already left immediately returned. Even King Zeon of Gilnis, who had withdrawn from the alliance, sent his ministers to express his condolences. Duke, Ryan, Andoin, and the rest felt heavy as they followed Uther, who had a solemn look on his face. At this point, the priest's cure illness was already very mature. Ordinary ailments and pains would not affect Bishop Alonso's body. Duque secretly asked Uther if the archbishop was cursed, but Uther shook his head. Outside the archbishop's bedroom, Duque saw King Salas, who was a little depressed. Salas's eyes were red, and it was very likely that he had cried a little. Not every fallen king had a spiritual leader like Andoin as a helper, and not every king had a decathlon like Duke who could support the whole country. In the days when Stormguard was destroyed, Archbishop Alonso's was the one who accompanied Salas the most. At the crucial time of the restoration of the country, the one who gave the people of Stormguard the most help other than Duque was Alonso's. Alonso's suddenly collapsed. Even a man like Salas, who had been through a lot, felt an important pillar of support in his heart collapse. Other than Bolvar for Dragon, who was still in charge of the country in Stormwind, and Reginald Windsor, who stayed in the Riedrich Mountains to command Duque's private army, all the paladins were already waiting outside the door. Seeing Duque and the others coming, Salas's mouth was full of bitterness. Lord Fail's time is limited. According to the archbishop's wishes, Uther will lead you in one by one. The first to enter was Lang. 5 minutes later, Lang came out with a heavy heart. To everyone's surprise, they thought that Anduin Lothar, who had the best relationship with Alonso's, would be the last to enter. Who knew that the archbishop would arrange for Lothar to be the second to last? As for the last person who was the most important, the archbishop's order was surprisingly given to Duke. 15 minutes later, Andoin came out with tears on his face. Uther lowered his head. Duque, Master wants to see you alone. Everyone was extremely shocked. As the eldest disciple of Fail, Uther was the most outstanding and the archbishop was most proud of. His justice and bravery had long surpassed the boundaries of the country. Since the archbishop was critically ill, Uther had been by his side. Basically, every time Fail met with the politicians of the various countries, there would be at least one disciple accompanying him. Generally, it would be Uther, Theon, and Sidan. Now, it was a private meeting. What did Alonso's want to say to Duque? Even a righteous paladin like Uther could not attend. Everyone's curiosity was in their throats. Duque entered. It was a very bright and very simple room. There was no strong smell of medicine as expected, but the room was filled with natural and peaceful faint golden light. Alonso's sat upright on the bed. He did not look like a dying person at all. Seeing Duque's shock, Alonso's laughed. I don't look like a dying person, do I? Duque nodded. A person like Alonso's did not need to lie, even if it was a white lie. I used to think that as long as one's heart was pure, the amount of holy light a human body could contain was unlimited. Unfortunately, compared to my soul, my mortal body was the first to succumb, Alonso said with a bitter smile. Let me put it this way. My body could not bear such a huge amount of holy light. My organs began to forget how they originally worked, and as a result, my body uncontrollably weakened. It's really sad, isn't it? An archbishop who was once determined to use holy light to save the world actually died under holy light. The bitter smile on his face became even more intense. Your Excellency, you're asking too much. Humans are not like the Naru, who are creatures made purely of holy light. Naru? A pure holy light creature. Alonso suddenly became curious. Duke suddenly realized that he had let the cat out of the bag. They could not even talk about counterattacking Draenor. The Alliance had not met the Draenei yet, so naturally, they would not know about the Naru. He could only say that he had seen descriptions of such a race in the books of Karazhan, but had not personally witnessed it. Alonso saw through Duque's disguise, but he did not blame Duque. Instead, he said, "Duque, are you willing to inherit my will?" Chapter 664. Duque was almost scared to death on the spot. "Are you asking me to delete my character and start all over again?" "Huh?" Duque pointed at his face in surprise. "I'm a mage." Alonso's was taken aback, and immediately laughed. No, you misunderstood. Although I personally created the profession of paladin, it's also because priests and paladins have common characteristics. I don't have the wisdom to cross different power systems to turn a mage into a priest. That's, the fact that Nesario transformed into the Lord of Pristo and almost became one of the kings of the Alliance deeply touched me. Although this is a part of human nature, it also made me alert. If the important members of the Alliance are corrupted by evil and fall spiritually, the consequences will be devastating. Duque thought to himself, are you a quack too? Did you also foresee the fall of Arthas and Kael? That's... Who knew that Alonso's slap in the face, which was clearly unintentional, made Du's face swell. Archbishop Alonso said directly, "Actually, the person I'm most worried about is you, Duque." "Me?" Duque pointed at himself bitterly. "Yes. In the entire Alliance, the one I admire the most, but also worry about the most, is you." "Duque, is this a compliment or a criticism? Is this a form of flattery? You have the most outstanding military talent since Thoradin the Great. No king, marshal, or general can match your talent in commanding. You are also likely to become the greatest mage in human history. As long as you are given enough time, it is not surprising that you surpass the previous guardian, Medivh. But I found that you have a fatal weakness. Your will is too weak compared to your power. You can even find this. Actually, you're not the only one who has a weakness. Since ancient times, almost all heroes who became famous at a young age have similar weaknesses. They reach the peak of their achievements at a very young age, then lose themselves and their direction in the midst of flowers and applause. They had forgotten their original intentions, forgotten their own hearts. They pursue illusory fame too much, and in the end, they fall. In fact, there are many saints in the Cathedral of Light who have fallen to the devil's minions. No, I know very well that the Burning Legion will come. I don't have the capital to fall. And the Burning Legion. I don't even love succubi. How can I fall in love with someone with a different style? Completely unaware of Duke's thoughts, Alonso's continued to sigh. I'm not denying your achievements and status. However, if something were to happen to you, the core power of the Alliance, it would be no less than Nesario's attack on the Long Sleep Temple back. For a moment, Dooku felt as though 100,000 alpacas were galloping in his heart. Are you trying to say I might become the second Nesario? If it was anyone else who said this to Duke would definitely slap them without any explanation. But towards Alonso's, a true saint who had dedicated his life to the people, especially a saint who was about to die, Duke could not bring himself to be angry. Duque lowered his head slightly. Your Grace is right. My temperament does need to be tempered. All right, I'll accept it. Alonso's waved his hand. No. I'm the one who's being rude. Duque, you've proven yourself several times under the temptation and coercion of the devil, yet I still doubt you. It's my fault. Unfortunately, with Aegwynn and Medivh as precedents, I still hope that you can accept the power of holy light that contains my will. I swear, this power of holy light will not destroy your body or soul. Its only function is to automatically fight back for you when your body and soul are invaded by the devil. I dare not say that I can resist the power of a greater demon, but high-level demons are not a problem. Phew. Duque heaved a sigh of relief. In that case, I have no objections. Actually, I also know that you mages don't like. Wait, you agree? As a preacher who taught people to be kind, Alonso's talent in verbal cannons was undoubtedly top-notch. He was already mentally prepared to guide Duque to be kind no matter what. Because if Duque fell, the Alliance would really be in trouble. Who would have thought that Duque had always been worried about not having enough humanity? Previously, Gul'dan had activated the curse that Sargeras had left on Duque, which had drained a lot of Duque's humanity. Duque had never been able to replenish it. At the end of the day, Duque was still someone who was afraid of death. Fearlessness and whatnot never happened to him. But under external pressure, he was always able to erupt with unprecedented courage at the critical moment. This time, Duque had chosen to accept it because he was also afraid of death. Duque had had enough of the greater demon's curse. That level of curse would not only consume one's life and soul, but even worse was the contamination of one's spirit and will. This was not something that could be withstood with just a firm will. Duque was not Bolvar. When he asked himself if his body was constantly being burned by flames, the first thing he would have to do was to surrender. Chief Shaman of the Burning Legion. Elder, please accept me as your disciple. I don't ask for anything. Just give me 2 coquettish sluts. Oh, no, 2 succubus secretaries. Cough cough. Duque discovered one thing. If Zul was chosen by Jaden as the Lich King because of his talent in controlling a large number of undead subordinates, then Duque, who had the system elf, seemed to be more suitable to be the Lich King than Zul. After advancing to a Radiant Moon Archmage, Duque discovered that the upper limit of his control had greatly increased. Now, he could control up to 512 magic hands at the same time, and could launch 256 of the highest level of Flame Blast at the same time. Duque could not imagine what would happen if he, a transmigrator with super multicasting talent and super group mind control ability, degenerated into a Lich King. Wouldn't that mean that the world of Azeroth would definitely kneel? For the sake that the fierce girl beside him did not have to turn against him, for the sake that he did not have to open a harem as a dead person, for the sake of the few benefits of transmigrators, Duque was determined to fight against evil to the end. Looking at Duque's complicated eyes, Alonso's felt very strange. He had seen countless people in his life, noble, despicable, hypocritical, and despicable. He dared to say that he could see through a person's character at a glance. But the feeling that Duque gave him was always the most special one. Obviously, Duque looked like a little ruffian. He did not have a firm belief, did not have enough courage to do big things, and at most had a little cleverness. But every time at a critical moment, he would give people a contradictory feeling, and one could fully see the flash of humanity in him. Perhaps it was because of this contradiction that he was human. Alonso's Fail extended his hand to Duque. Chapter 665. Looking at this kind and noble old man reaching out his skinny hand, Duque had mixed feelings. It wasn't that he didn't think of using the 7 eternal slots that Alexstrasza had transferred to him. The results of the system's scan made him depressed. According to the scan, there is a 98.44% chance that the Archbishop had purged too much evil power, and the accumulated dark power had destroyed his body's acceptance of the power of the Holy Light. This caused the Archbishop to be unable to bear the excessive power of the Holy Light in his body, and he self-destructed. Duque sighed deeply, reached out his hand, and gently held Alonso's hand. The gentle Holy Light came, and it was like the comfort of the warm sun in winter. There was no surging sense of power, and there was no high and mighty majesty. There was only the benevolent faith of an old man who had given his whole life. In the golden holy light, Duque found himself in a trance. His vision became blurry, and the scene in front of him seemed to have traveled through more than 2,000 years, and arrived at the newly established Lordaeron. Countless new human settlements were scattered all over the lush Tirisful glade. After defeating the evil trolls, humans were taking root in this forest step by step. With the hope of civilization, they absorbed nutrients from this land, and multiplied. Back then, King Menethil loved his people dearly because he believed that with his hard work, he would one day make his people strong enough to support the entire human race. They faced countless beasts, and the remnants of the trolls who were unwilling to be destroyed, and fought with all their might. More than 2,000 years later, there was another green tide that swept the whole continent, but the enemies changed from trolls to orcs. Humans, dwarves, high elves, and even dragons won with everyone's hard work. However, the land was destroyed for the first time in 2,800 years. Alonso's was very sad, because in the darkest era since the pioneering era, when the people needed hope the most, he could not hold on. Even with the will that came from the holy light, Duque could feel Alonso's sorrow. The land was devastated, and the people were homeless. A woman who had lost her husband carried a crying baby on her back, endured the pain brought about by the war, and did a man's job with tears in her eyes. She climbed up the roof to help the neighbor's auntie fix the hole in the roof, braved the cold wind to go up the mountain to chop firewood, picked up a sickle like a man, and charged at the starving orcs who rushed into the village. Everything that Alonso's had seen with his own eyes had been transmitted over to Duke, and it was presented so vividly in front of his eyes. For the king, the war was over. For the people, the war was not over. The old peace was short-lived. A new war would come. At this moment, Duque truly felt that he and the Azeroth people were breathing the same air of the future and shouldering the same huge sense of mission. As a transmigrator, he had the gaze of a prophet that could make everyone in the world tremble. But Duque had not done enough. You can do better. Protecting Azeroth, the last human habitat, was not an easy task. Duque could not go back. If that was the case, then he had to be prepared to work hard for decades, or even centuries, until the Titan of creation came again and destroyed the Burning Legion to achieve the ultimate peace. He shouldered the future of Azeroth, the inheritance of civilization, and the continuation of order. His efforts to change World War II was only a small step in changing the future of Azeroth. This was far from enough. The war between the Alliance and the Horde in the Eastern Kingdom, which only took up 1/5 of Azeroth's land area, and even the war that would spread to the entire world in the future, was nothing more than a joke in front of the Burning Legion spaceships. There are still many things I can do. More black technology, more progress, more magical skills. Only then can humans, no, the entire Alliance stand at the edge of this mysterious universe. Alonso's Fail did not have the ability to read minds. He did not know what Duke had seen, discovered, or comprehended after the holy light that had passed on his will was transmitted over. But seeing the expression on the face of the most talented young man in the history of the Alliance, Alonso's knew that as the guide, he had opened the door to a vast world for Duque. He no longer had the chance to see the magnificent scenery at the door, but he knew that the will of the holy light would be passed on, and the hope of humans would be reignited. Alonso smiled and patted Duque's shoulder, doing something that surprised Duque. He, who was supposed to be extremely weak, suddenly got up from the bed. He did not look like a dying man at all. Only Duque was sad. He knew that Alonso's, a respectable senior, had released the last shackle, allowing the power of the holy light to impact every cell, every inch of muscle, and every organ in his body. That was his last glory, and also the last will that the Archbishop of the Holy Light wanted to pass on to the world. The entire Cathedral of Holy Light abruptly responded to Alonso's will. No, it was not just this cathedral. From the Tirisful woodland, from the silverpine forest, from the white domes of every cathedral on the continent, golden rays of light shot out. Countless rays of golden light crossed the void and gathered there, forming a huge pillar of light that was more than 100 meters in diameter. It rose into the sky from the center of Rotterdam city. Every room and prayer hall in the cathedral that Alonso's was in echoed with the prayers of the priests in unison. However, the bishops of various sizes who were dressed in gorgeous robes opened their eyes in shock, because for the first time, there was a response from the holy light in the spiritual world that was originally empty and silent. The big bell in the holy palace suddenly rang when it sensed the intense holy light that was echoing in the air. The priests rushed out of the prayer hall one after another. They saw the door of Archbishop Fail's ward open. No one opened the door. Alonso's hovered in midair under the support of the power of the holy light, and floated out slowly. Duque followed behind him and arrived at the center of the main hall. Alonso stood in the void like a god who had descended to the world. Every priest prostrated on the ground consciously. Every holy knight knelt on one knee and placed his right hand on the breastplate on the left side of his chest. Even the king of a country had to bow deeply to show his humility towards the power of the holy light. Alonso smiled and said, "Someone once asked me why I did not appoint the next archbishop of the holy light. At this last moment, I will answer this question." Several bishops who had once tried to fight for power immediately shivered, and subconsciously pressed their foreheads closer to the cold ground. Chapter 666. I once said, I hope that one day, I can spread the path of the holy light to the commoners and teach them the meaning of the three great virtues. I have spent my entire life working hard for this and have never once deviated from the will of the holy light. So, I am the archbishop that all of you acknowledge. From the very beginning, I've always believed that worldly authority shouldn't be the ruler of the holy light. If I were to personally appoint a successor, then the Church of Holy Light would one day be filled with benefits, and it would gradually decay and be destroyed. Since I am destined to return to the embrace of the Holy Light, then let the Holy Light choose a true emissary of light. Alonso slowly extended his right index finger and pointed in the air. The ethereal and holy voice sounded again. Who among you is willing to dedicate every moment of your life to the Holy Light? Swear on your soul before the holy light that you will help the weak, save the sick, punish the cruel, uphold justice, and spread the three great virtues for the rest of your life. After a pause, Alonso's continued, those who are willing, please step forward. As soon as he finished speaking, the holy light on his body doubled in strength. To the naked eye, this was already a radiance that was more dazzling than the sun. However, none of the people present felt that the holy light was dazzling. Even though it was dazzling, everyone could clearly see every detail on Alonso's body. A regional bishop of the Church of Holy Light who had been fighting for the position of archbishop wanted to stand up and step forward. However, he was horrified to feel the resistance from the holy light. It was a type of disgust and resistance towards impure things. It was like an evil creature that wanted to call itself a brother of a holy creature but was coldly and mercilessly rejected. It was not that he did not try to sneak in, but he was immediately met with an even greater retaliation from the holy light. Suddenly, a golden holy light rose from his body. The holy light was like a flame that surrounded his body. If he made the slightest movement, he would immediately feel a heart-wrenching pain. He was drenched in sweat and crawled on the ground in fear, not daring to move anymore. Alonso's looked at the regional bishop from Derbyshire with a pitiful gaze before retracting his gaze. The will of the Holy Light was clear. Those who attempted to ascend to the position of Archbishop of Holy Light with selfish desires would be punished severely. Alonso shook his head slightly and said slowly, the position of an archbishop does not represent authority, nor does it represent glory. On the contrary, it was a sacred duty. This means that the person who ascends to this position will have to shoulder the heavy responsibility of saving the miserable and suffering people from despair. An archbishop is not a savior. He could not save every good soul that was exposed to the butcher knife of the cruel enemy. But the archbishop represents the ultimate beauty and goodness of the world, and represents the last hope of everyone in despair. What right does an ordinary mortal have to recite the archbishop's name in despair? Because of your selfless sacrifice and dedication. Because of all the hard work you've done for the people of the world. You used your own life and soul to set a benchmark for the goodness of the world. To bring hope to billions of lives. At this point, Alonso's voice slowed down. The holy light rejects all impurities. Those with selfish desires, please leave. I will ask you one last time, who wishes to inherit the will of the holy light and make your name truly sacred, please step forward. A bishop retreated. He was ashamed. He crawled on the ground, moved his legs, and slowly exited the hall. 2 bishops retreated. 5 bishops retreated. Of the bishops of the 7 kingdoms, apart from Fao who was also the bishop of Lordaeron, 5 had retreated. Only Benedictus, the bishop of Stormwind, was left. Benedictus neither advanced nor retreated. He calmly knelt on the ground, letting his face be bathed in the waves of holy light that undulated in the main hall. He was quietly waiting for the new archbishop to be born. Alonso's demands were too high. All humans have selfish desires. Humans had birth, old age, sickness, and death. As long as one was human, there would always be things one wanted to do. Was there really such a perfect, selfless saint? Speaking of which, if he was this pious, was he still human? At this moment, a person moved. He was Alonso's most beloved and valued disciple, Wuther the Lightbringer. Wuther's calm voice rang out. I believe I can do all of the above. If everyone does not mind that I am a holy knight, I am willing to accept the inheritance of the will of the holy light. There was a low commotion around, but it quickly subsided. Alonso spoke. The path of the holy light does not discriminate by nationality or race. The holy light is the ultimate wish of all things in the world. If you, Wuther, are willing to offer your life and soul to the holy light for all people in the world, then please stand in front of me. Wuther did not hesitate. He walked up to Alonso's, who was suspended in the air, and knelt on one knee. He lowered his head, which he did not even lower for the king. I, Wuther the Lightbringer, swear before the holy light that I am willing to abide by the 3 great virtues. I will use my life to spread the holy light, spread hope, punish evil, and promote justice. The clear and sonorous voice echoed throughout the entire Holy Light Cathedral. Although it was a little strange for a holy knight to be the next archbishop of the Holy Light, the priests quickly accepted it. Yes. Only a truly selfless person had the right to set foot on that holy position, and only had the right to be holy in the hearts of the people. Alonso smiled as he lowered his body and patted the shoulder of his most devout disciple. Tears of gratification flowed from the corner of his eyes. He looked up to the sky and shouted, "Praise the holy light." Suddenly, an illusory ball of golden holy light descended on Wuther's head, forming a golden crown that looked like a garland. This was the holy light's recognition of Wuther. For a moment, everyone was stunned. After being stunned for a full 3 seconds, countless priests knelt on the ground, straightened their backs, and raised their hands to the sky. Praise the holy light, praise holy Wuther. The next moment, everyone's voice stopped. That's right. The moment the inheritance was completed, Alonso's Fail's name became history. Wuther the Lightbringer's name became the new holy. Wuther the Lightbringer's tears flowed down his face as he hugged his teacher's limp body. On this day, with Lordaeron as the starting point, the bells of every church of light in every city and every small town in every village rang. Countless believers knelt on the ground and cried in sorrow. Everyone used this method to commemorate the passing of a true saint. Standing on the balcony of the state guesthouse, Duque looked at the Holy Light Cathedral from afar and suddenly said softly, "Let's go. It's time to leave." Chapter 667. The 3rd year and 2nd month of the Dark Portal. The earth was still frozen, and there were no signs of life waking up. This was the most difficult time of winter. It was still winter, but almost all the food was gone. In the northern continent of Rotterdam, corpses of people who had frozen and starved to death could be seen everywhere. Due to the cold weather, there was no need to worry about the plague. However, the hard layer of ice made everyone give up on the idea of burying their companions or neighbors. The nobles of Rotterdam were celebrating the victory of the war in the warm castle. In Stormwind, the southernmost part of the continent, Lang was inspecting his territory with Prince William. Yes, braving the -5 degrees Celsius cold wind and light snow. As there were still remnants of the orcs in the depths of the elven forest, Lang had no choice but to bring more than 500 royal knights with him. Of course, there was no lack of paladins, priests, hunters, mages, and a few rangers from the Windrunner family. As they passed by the graveyard outside Gold's Higher town, a few frozen corpses jumped into Lang and William's sight. What's going on? Andoan, who was inspecting with Lang, felt a fire burning in his chest. Before he could get angry, his followers naturally summoned the terrified mayor of Goldshire town. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. We didn't know you were coming. Didn't know? Does that give you enough time to hide the body? King Leon's words were laced with daggers, which made him look even more majestic. It's not like that, Your Majesty. Your Majesty, please take a closer look. Most of them are elderly. The mayor, who was so scared that he wet his pants, tried to explain. Lang took a look and found that it was indeed so. Before they came back to the elven forest, their bodies were not in good condition. Everyone advised them not to come back, but they stubbornly said that they wanted to die in their hometown. During the week of turbulence on the ship, we tried our best to take care of them. According to Sir Marcus's instructions, we kept them near the doctor or the priest. Unfortunately, they didn't make it. The mayor's explanation made Lang and the rest fall silent. Hometown had a special and sacred meaning to every citizen of Stormwind. Since the founding of the kingdom, thousands of years had passed, and many people had never left their homeland. During the days when Stormwind had fallen, even Lang himself had painfully wondered if he would ever have the chance to return to Stormwind, the land that had been passed down for generations. In the days after the fall, perhaps he and his people were eager to restore their country. What if he died in battle, and all the warriors who were determined to restore the country died in battle? What if it dragged on for 5 or 10 years and they still couldn't recover their country? By that time, how many people would be willing to support the restoration of Stormwind? Lang, Andoan, and even the young William could clearly understand the desire of the citizens, especially the elderly citizens, to return to their hometown. Lang sighed. In the cold winter weather, his sigh formed an icy mist that was incomparably clear. Mr. Mayor, I accept your explanation. However, please take us to the place where the civilians gather. I will use my eyes to witness the results of your work and your loyalty to the kingdom and its people. Of course. Of course. The mayor wiped the beads of sweat that had started to form on his face, and hurriedly led Lang and the rest into the town. As Goldshire town had once been the base of the Horde's attack on Stormwind City, and had been burned down by Duque, many of the trees still looked bare even after more than a year had passed. They were either dead or had yet to grow back. In the slightly deserted town, Lang was pleased to see many human-style houses standing tall in the town. A year and a half ago, the same place had been filled with the disgusting, dirty, and messy tents of the Horde. Father, many of the houses here look the same, Prince William exclaimed in surprise. Lang was also very surprised. As the king, he had only seen reports from Duque about how many houses had been built. Regarding internal affairs reports, Lang had always looked at them with a watery eye. In Lang's impression, if a tenth of the houses could be built, it would be good if the rest of the people could have a sturdier tent. Now, it seemed that Duque's report was completely true, without a single bit of watery information. Thanks to Grand Duke Marcus' new building manual, we were able to build a winter house for every household in the town before winter came, a total of 1,120 households. As long as there is a man in the family, even if he doesn't know how to build a house, under the guidance of a craftsman, a sturdy house can be built by 5 or 6 people in a month. Lang, Andoan, and William were all shocked. They knew nothing about building houses, but they had seen how carpenters and stonemasons built houses in the past. It was impossible to build a house in less than half a year. What kind of efficiency was this now? The mayor first brought the king and the rest to the warehouse. Many pieces of wood were stacked neatly in the warehouse. Lang noticed that there were grooves on both ends of each piece of wood. This is, the mayor said, I don't know the specifics. Mr. Van Cleve from the Brotherhood of Stonemasons explained a lot to me. He said that as long as the pillars and beams marked with a specific number are placed at a specific location on the flat ground, they can be directly lapped up, and the nails on top can be used to make the frame of the house. The house will not fall apart easily. Then, a double layer of wooden planks is prepared in advance, and the house is basically built. That's it. Andoin was stunned. There's no way to use the stove for heating. This can only be built by the more idle women. Bring me to have a look, Lang ordered. After walking for a short while, the group arrived at a commoner's house at the edge of the town. They knocked on the door of the house, and the farmer welcomed the king and the rest in a panic. You don't have to kneel, stand and talk. In this era of strict hierarchy, it was a great blessing for the commoners to not have to kneel when they saw the king. They would not dare to sit together with the king even if they were beaten to death. Thank you, Your Majesty, the man said in unison with his wife and 3 half-grown children. Are you a soldier on leave? Andoin noticed the man's necklace. There was a rectangular plate on the necklace, which was the idea that Duque had come up with, the military plate. The military plate was marked with the soldier's name, place of origin, affiliation, and meritorious service. The man immediately stood at attention in a standard military posture. Captain Joseph Adams of the 5th Squad of the 3rd Brigade of the Kingdom's 5th Infantry Regiment salutes you, Commander Lothar. How was the winter? Lang asked with a smile. Thank you, Saint Duque, we had a good time. Joseph's face changed almost as soon as he finished speaking. Saint Duque. Chapter 668. The mayor's face turned ghastly pale. Even if Leon had the reputation of being a wise king, who could guarantee that Leon wouldn't be jealous and resentful? How could he judge a subject as a saint in front of a king? That was a huge taboo. If it was in the past, no one would sigh for them even if they hung all the gossipers in the town on the spot. The mayor already wanted to kneel down and beg for mercy. Unexpectedly, King Leon raised his hand and raised his left palm, gesturing for them to stop. He did not care about Joseph, who had already knelt down in fear, nor did he care about the trembling mayor. Instead, he turned to Prince William and said, Child, today I want to teach you the way of a king. Father, please speak. I'm listening. The little prince nodded seriously. To be a wise king, the first thing you have to do is never be jealous of a minister who is more talented than you. When it comes to war, I am far inferior to your uncle Andoin. He is the god of war in the hearts of the soldiers. I am not. When it comes to strategizing and internal affairs, I can't even learn a little bit about your brother Duque. I only know that under his management, my people are living a better life. Lang shrugged his shoulders and pursed his lips, making a funny expression. All right, if I was the kind of stupid king who couldn't bear to see his minister become a saint, should I behead Andoin and hang Duque, and then let the people send me to the stake? Oh, no, no. Before the people do anything, the women from the Windrunner family will first skin me alive. Oh. That's too bad. I might as well die in Storm Fortress. After hearing Ryan's words, Andoin, the ministers, and even the guards of the Wang family were all affected by Ryan's mischievous antics, and they all smiled in relief. They all knew Lang very well. This was a king who might not be the most capable, but his character was absolutely noble. You must absolutely trust the ministers who are good to the people, understand? For example, your uncle Andoin and brother Duque. William's eyes were filled with admiration. I understand now. Lang's behavior made the mayor and Joseph's family let go of their grudges, and they also opened up a chatterbox. Through their mouths, Lang truly understood how effective Duque's policy was. Since there was no need for war for the time being, Duque asked Lothar to order the army to take a break. More than 70% of the soldiers were given a break and were able to return to their hometown to participate in the reconstruction. There were only 2 requirements for these soldiers. First, they had to report back to the army after the spring plowing next year. Otherwise, they would be treated as deserters. Second, they had to wear their military tags when working in their hometown. This was to let everyone know that the kingdom had sent them back to help. With the return of a large number of able-bodied men, the reconstruction work was able to speed up. At the same time, due to the bountiful harvest of food in the western wilderness, the people did not have to worry about starving that winter. If that was all, Duque's name would not be sacred in the hearts of the people. Perhaps the story of Duque's bravery in fighting Nicerio was something that people in a country that worshipped martial arts relished. But for most commoners, it was just a topic of conversation after a meal. The only thing that could really make them smile happily was a stable and happy life. Originally, everyone had already prepared for the worst. In history, there had never been a great migration without a large number of deaths. The weak, old, women, and children would die of hunger, cold, or disease in the shortest time possible. However, as a transmigrator, Duque used his modern conventional medical knowledge to reverse all of this. The cement road that ran through the entire elven forest from east to west provided the most solid foundation for the transportation of supplies. Long before the recovery of Stormwind, Duque had Edwin van Cleve and Gerion Stallman prepare everything. Duque had perfectly considered every aspect of clothing, food, housing, and transportation. The first was winter clothing. There was cotton in Azeroth, and it had been set up early in the western wilderness. It allowed the Dark Portal to harvest 200,000 kilograms of cotton in the autumn of Stormwind in the second year of the Dark Portal. This was not an ideal number, but it could allow most women and children to live a relatively warm winter. The people of Azeroth still mainly wore linen clothes. In the past, they had to rely on the fire to warm themselves in the winter. When had they ever worn such warm clothes? Every person who put on a cotton-padded coat was full of praise for this new winter clothing that they called Duque's cotton-padded coat. In terms of food, in addition to the basic black bread, Duque also added a large amount of meat. The small fishing boats that could not travel long distances were sent out early in the morning. With the help of the Mare people, there was a constant catch even in winter. The high-fat whale meat and various fish were already ice cubes when they were sent ashore. Although it was a little heavy, it was better to keep them fresh. It could be transported from Stormwind Port to the East Elven Forest hundreds of kilometers away. People could add a delicious meal for their families at an extremely low price. During the Great Retreat, the people had lost almost all their belongings. Duque could not always distribute profits, because this would breed corruption and laziness. Therefore, Duque's solution was to provide relief through work. They were paid to build houses for their neighbors. They were paid to transport food and cotton-padded clothes for the village. They were also paid to make cotton-padded clothes for the women. They were paid to help make javelins. They were paid to take care of the lonely elderly or the sick and disabled. Soldiers on leave were paid to join the patrols. There was also a reward for killing wild beasts or orcs that invaded. As long as one could work and was willing to work, there was absolutely no need to worry about starving or freezing to death. Duque also stipulated that within 3 years, a minimum and maximum wage system must be implemented, and several profiteers who inflated prices were hanged. Moreover, taking advantage of the winter, when people could not work, the next year's farmland was distributed to each household early and seeds were distributed. In addition, because a large number of the old aristocrats had been completely wiped out, more than 90% of the people had become free people. Those who were newly appointed nobles because of their military exploits were strictly limited to the proportion of taxes. For a time, the mental outlook of the people of the country was refreshed. This was not only limited to Gold Flash Town. Lang and his group went all the way east, and it was the same at Blackwell Farm and East Valley Lumberyard. If there was any difference in different places, it was that in Duque's territory, the implementation of various policies was more resolute. Lang met the manager of the East Valley Lumberyard, Darnielle, and found that the former mage had become the director of a factory specializing in the production of magic items. The cold winter had not yet passed, but the hearts of every citizen were warm. They were looking forward to the arrival of spring. Because, that was the birth of a kingdom. The deceased Archbishop Alonso's Fail was a saint in the spiritual realm in the hearts of the people, and Duque was a saint in the material realm. Because of him, the people lived an unexpectedly good life. Therefore, his name became sacred in the hearts of the people. From this winter onwards, the people of Storm Country used to add the word saint in front of Duque's name. Chapter 669. At the same time, there were many cases of people freezing to death all over Lordaeron. Apart from the Tirisful Forest and the holy city of Stratholme, most of Lordaeron's territory had been ravaged by the orcs. The Silverpine Forest had been burnt to a crisp by the flame tactics. The eastern region, later known as the Eastern and Western Plague Lands, had been ravaged by the orcs before they attacked Cuel Salis. Almost no town was left unscathed. The people could only gather in their dilapidated houses and shiver in fear. According to the latest statistics, there were at least 100,000 people who had died this winter. Upon hearing this news, King Salas of Stormguard suddenly felt extremely lucky. He had also heard of Duque's method of building houses, but the unprepared people of Stormguard had no way of using it. Duque gave him a suggestion, forbidding the people from returning to the earthy highlands before spring. A large number of people were settled in the former Stormwind refugee camp in the Hillsbrad Hills. There, at least, they had almost perfect living conditions and stored food that could not be carried away by Stormwind. Although it was said to be stored food, it was actually the food that the Berev family had hidden in a secret place over the years. The Berev family was forced to leave their territory by Turinas, but there were many things that could not be taken away. Since the Berev family was determined to follow Duque, the right to dispose of the food naturally fell into Duque's hands. Duque did them a favor and gave it to the people of Stormguard. Looking towards the south from Southshore, King Salas's cloak fluttered in the cold wind. He suddenly shouted, "Duque, we, the people of Stormguard, will remember this favor forever. Not for generations to come." Behind him, hundreds and thousands of warriors of Stormguard shouted in unison. "Forever in our hearts, not for generations to come." On the 15th of February, standing on the peak of the Riedridge Mountains, Lang suddenly asked, "Say, what is Duque doing now?" "Teaching students. I heard he made the little princess of Cuel Tira's vomit." Anduin shrugged. "So fast?" Not only Lang, but the ministers around him were also burning with curiosity. "No, it's because it's the first time I've seen blood," Anduin corrected. "Of course you'll see blood the first time." Lang had an expression that said, "We understand." Only the young Prince William was dumbfounded. He looked left and right, not knowing what these mysterious adults were talking about. "It's not what you think." Anduin realized that he had inadvertently made things worse. His face turned green, and he had no choice but to roar, "Go and find out for yourselves. I'm not going to bother about this." This time, Lang and the ministers were dumbfounded. "Duque, what the hell are you doing?" The Dark Portal 3, February 14th. A certain otaku with the surname Du, who had never even touched a girl's hand back then, swore to use his power to name February 14th every year as Lover's Death Day. Later, because a certain man had successfully won over the Windrunner sisters, he shamelessly used his power to bluff King Lang in January. "Oh, Lang. I always felt that the Stormwind population loss was too great. To nurture a qualified soldier, we must first have a qualified young man. It will take at least 16 years for a baby to grow into an adult warrior." "You mean to encourage childbirth?" "The ministers discussed it with me before, but didn't you say that the country could not provide more money to encourage childbirth?" "No, we don't need money. We can set February 14th as Valentine's Day. Apart from the soldiers on duty, all soldiers can have a day off." "Why Valentine's Day?" Lang was curious. "Ah. In order to fight against the evil orc invaders, countless good men rushed to the battlefield without leaving a single man or woman behind. Many of them shed their blood on the battlefield, unable to return home to reunite with their beloved girls. Don't you think it's a great tragedy?" Seeing Duque put one hand on his chest and the other stretched out like a bard reciting a poem, the corner of Lang's eye twitched. "In order to deal with the tribe, this can't be helped." "Yes. But at the end of the war, don't you think we should compensate our warriors well? At least 30% of our soldiers have to stay in the barracks or go out on patrol for the entire winter. You know, we have to maintain at least 100,000 standing soldiers for a long time in the future. Think about it, tens of thousands of soldiers have been holding back for the entire winter, and then suddenly announced that they can go home to reunite with their loved ones. What would happen? The evil Duque smirked. Well, that image was too beautiful. Oh, it was too painful for the eyes. Lang, who had always been serious, could not help but facepalm. However, this era did not have the three gods of death on earth, Durex, Okamoto, and Jasper. These three gods of death had prevented billions of humans from being born. There had long been statistics on Earth. Starting from February, after 10 months, the number of babies born in December was the highest. Lang smiled bitterly and turned to look at Anduin, who was also rubbing his eyebrows. What do you think? Lothar could only answer with a bitter smile. In terms of military discipline, it's terrible, but in the long run, it's beneficial to the country, so I can only agree. Anyway, those brats down there will definitely cheer. Hence, on the 25th of January, Stormwind officially announced that the 14th of February would be Valentine's Day in the kingdom. There would be a total of 3 days before and after that, and the soldiers could have a holiday in advance or later. It was so that the brave soldiers could reunite with their loved ones after going through tough training and battles. In this era, professional soldiers had very few days off, and there were no fixed holidays. Most of them had served for more than 15 years. In ancient Rome on Earth, professional soldiers had to serve for 25 years before they could retire. Before Stormwind, more than a third of the men were sent to the army for the sake of the war. Although the war was basically over, most of the soldiers had signed an oath with the kingdom to serve as soldiers. Now that the announcement was made without any warning, the whole country cheered. Jaina arrived in Stormwind by ship on the 15th of January. On the surface, it was to become Lin Li's disciple, but in fact, Dai Lin had asked Jaina to come over with the intention of marrying off his daughter. Just the accompanying goods and servants alone took up 3 large ships, and there was also a team of 200 elite guards. Yes, there were also a few ceremonial officers. If anything really happened, the wedding would be held immediately. Duque protested sternly, saying that it was not becoming Lin Li's disciple, but selling his daughter. The 2 old foxes, Dai Lin and Lang, ignored him, and had a tacit understanding. On the 1st of February, a convoy of 80 carriages arrived in Karazhan along the newly built cement road. 2 weeks later, it was the official Valentine's Day of Stormwind. 14th of February, Valentine's Day. Sitting in the newly renovated reception hall in Karazhan, Jaina was wearing a well-tailored mage robe. She felt that something special would happen today. Although she had been left hanging for 2 weeks after arriving, the official announcement that Khadgar gave her today was that Duque was giving her her first lesson. Chapter 670. What was Valentine's Day? 13 or 14-year-old girls were at the age where they loved to dream the most. Prince Arthas was not bad, but that was all. Arthas, who had yet to officially step onto the stage of the Alliance, was compared to the legendary Saint Duque, who was deified by the people. Well, although the two were only 4 years apart in age, Arthas was doomed to be outclassed. The princesses of this era were pitiful. How to find a husband was a common problem for all kings who had princesses. Those who were high would be looked down upon by their own people. It was not easy to be on the same level as them, as people would always associate them with usurping the throne. In the past 1,000 years, 70% of princesses had to be exported and sold domestically. The remaining 30% either grew old alone, or eloped with a groom or a knight, and were then mercilessly destroyed by the king. Only 1 out of 100 were successfully married off. Jaina had worried whether she would be forced to abandon her magic talent, because a queen who knew magic would always be easily associated with witches. Duque was ideal. Duque, who was a radiant moon archmage, would not restrict her in any way on the path of magic. And Duque's exaggerated status was comparable to a kingdom's fiefdom and uncrowned king, so Jaina did not feel that she was marrying down. Although she did not know why she went there as a disciple, seeing how her father looked like he was marrying off his daughter, and after receiving enough courtesy from Lang in Stormwind City, she had many guesses about Duque. many of which were unrealistic. It could not be helped. Who told the two kings to reach a consensus while Duque was determined to resist? All kinds of wonderful misunderstandings arose. From the looks of it, Gianna was tricked. She arrived in Karazhan and was left hanging for 2 weeks. Fortunately, she was not grounded, and her best friend Alusia accompanied her for these 2 weeks. The two met in Dalajan, and their similar statuses made them naturally close friends. Although she was surprised that Alusia took a big detour to become a countess under Duque, the revival of her close friend's family still made Jaina very happy. "When can I see Teacher Duque? The Grand Duke is very busy." The heavy responsibility of rebuilding the kingdom fell on his shoulders. It couldn't be helped. Most of the nobles with the ability to manage had perished in that shipwreck. Furthermore, the task of supplying the army of the blasted lands also falls on the Grand Duke. Alusia lied patiently. He was right. Alusia could not explain the almost natural resistance that Duque had towards Jaina. Duque had instructed Jaina before she arrived, "I don't want to marry Gianna." "Alusia, you and Jaina are good friends, right? Then hang her out for 2 weeks. As long as she doesn't leave my fief, you can take her anywhere you want." Moreover, at that time, Duque was hugging her waist and whispering in her ear. This was simply asking her to set up her best friend. However, Duque's declaration that he didn't want to marry Jaina warmed her heart. Whether it was logically her vassal should first pledge her loyalty to the Grand Duke, or the relationship between the two of them almost broke through the last hurdle, both drove her to help Duque set up Jaina. In the end, even though she knew that Duque was actually teaching Ronan in the depths of Karazhan's library, Alusia stubbornly said that she did not know. Then, she took Jaina and a group of followers to stroll around the East Elven forest. However, after witnessing a series of miraculous policies that Duque had used to help the people survive the cold winter, Jaina's impression of Duque had increased. He's not only a powerful mage and an extraordinary commander, he's also a great ruler. The young princess did not hide her admiration for Duque. Alusia held her forehead and sighed in her heart, "I'm just following your orders. I don't care what happens next." On the night of the 13th of February, when the Einherjar mage Khadgar came to inform Jaina, Jaina was pleasantly surprised and a little anxious. She had a feeling that this new Valentine's Day was very likely prepared for her. However, Khadgar repeatedly emphasized that the first lesson tomorrow was practical magic, which made Jaina very confused. "Isn't tomorrow the new Valentine's Day, set by Stormwind?" Jaina tried to get more information from Khadgar. Khadgar shrugged, "So what if it is? I'm only responsible for informing you." Then, "Mr. Khadgar, do you have any suggestions for me?" Even though the intelligent Jaina did not know how to bribe a ghost, she still tried her best. "All right, I can only tell you that Master Marcus has never been an academic mage." With that, Khadgar bowed and left the room. Jaina was in a dilemma. She had no idea what to prepare for the next day. The Jordan magic staff was a must. There was a large magic crystal on the tip of the staff and 4 small crystals revolving around it. As an earth mage, it was currently the best staff she could use. What troubled her was what kind of magic robe to wear. Jaina almost subconsciously picked up the Insight magic robe. The moment she picked it up, her pretty face turned red. After trying it on, Jaina made a sexy S-shaped pose in front of herself in the mirror. She was immediately defeated by herself. "It's too embarrassing." It was a dress, but the upper body only had a gold-embroidered bra, and a golden belt covered the belly button from the center of the chest all the way to the waistline. Apart from that, there was nothing else on her upper body. Her slender waist and smooth back were completely exposed to the air. Her lower body seemed more proper, but upon closer inspection, there were long openings on both sides of her thighs. Not only were her thighs completely exposed to the air, but as long as she walked a little wider, there was a chance that her breasts would be exposed. After changing no less than 10 robes, on the 14th of February, Jaina finally appeared in front of Duque wearing a pure white, moon-cloth robe, embellished with sapphires. The robe looked very dignified and elegant, but the exposed shoulders, accompanied by the brilliant golden hair scattered on the white robe, still showed off the unique beauty of a young girl. Fortunately, she changed. Otherwise, if she really wore the insight magic robe, Duque might really practice what it meant to make a profit every 3 years and never lose money. In the gorgeous Karazhan library, the moment Jaina saw Duque, her heart jumped violently. She was scared because she saw the scimitar that her father gave him at Duque's waist. Very good. Today's first lesson, I want you to know that the identity of a princess is meaningless. Chapter 671. Shock and unease froze on Jaina's beautiful face. Just from Duque's aura and gaze, Jaina knew that the person standing in front of her was her teacher, not her husband, Duque. What the hell? Duque is for real? It was not that Jaina did not think that Duque would be for real, but in her estimation, the probability was less than 1%. Even though she knew that her beauty was not necessarily better than Duque's rumored lovers, the Windrunner sisters. However, Jaina, who grew up in a royal family and was influenced by the nobility, still believed that she would be Duque's only choice in marriage. Now it seemed that she was wrong. She did not know why Duque looked at her with such resistance. She did not know if it was her fault or something else. Anyway, at this moment, Duque had completely put himself in the role of a strict teacher. Her identity as a princess was meaningless. Jaina almost wanted to refute Duque on the spot. However, she recalled the recent battle at the Dark Portal. Alterac had been destroyed, Silvermoon City had almost been taken over, and Stormwind and Stormguard had been destroyed. They had only managed to revive their countries. Jaina immediately understood what Duque meant. If there was no country behind her, then the so-called princess was just a meaningless princess of a destroyed country. Jaina's expression froze. Duque was right. Since ancient times, there was no kinship in the royal family, and the road to kingship was always filled with cruelty. Others only saw the glory of being a princess, but who would know her bitterness and helplessness if they were not at her level? Someone as smart as she already knew that her seemingly perfect marriage was actually because she was expelled from the core of Kultiraz's power. Jaina fell silent, and for a moment, she had the thought of retreating. Since ancient times, all the princesses of the 7 kingdoms had married outside, and all of them had died of depression. If she returned to Kultiraz, no. If she really went back, even if she had to find a plausible reason. To Kultiraz, she would be a disgrace. Just look at Princess Kalia. Fortunately, she was killed. Otherwise, the fact that she was once the fiancée of Deathwing was enough to make King Tyrrhenas want to ban her for life. Yes, if she returned, Kultiraz would not protect her. Although she was very talented in magic and had great potential, she was still far from Duque, who stood at the peak of the alliance and was destined to become a Breaking Dawn mage. After thinking for a while, Jaina immediately made a decision. With the staff in hand, Jaina bowed respectfully. Teacher Marcus, my surname is meaningless. In front of you is only Jaina, who came to learn the mysteries of magic. It was a perfect and flawless answer. Duque narrowed his eyes. He could not help but sigh at the astonishing inertia of history. Jaina's intelligence and talent were indeed astonishing. In just 3 seconds, she had realized the situation she was in and quickly found her position. Duque used the identity of Dai Lin's teacher to suppress Jaina, and in the blink of an eye, Jaina became a student. From the look in her eyes, she had already made up her mind to learn magic to protect herself first. Damn it, she was only 13 years old. As for Ronan, who had experienced many battles but lacked knowledge, Duque could let her soar in the sea of knowledge in the Karazhan Grand Library. As for Jaina, Duque decided to educate her in a way that could very likely change the course of her life. Alright, since you understand, I won't emphasize it anymore. Duque raised his face. I'm different from Great Wizard Antonidas. Strictly speaking, he belongs to the academic faction, but I think I'm a classic example of a practical one. I've improved more than 100 spells, all of which were adjusted in actual combat. The number of beast men that died by my hands is also in the 5 digits. Duque was not making things up. At this point, he had already mastered countless metamagic abilities. However, not every metamagic ability was suitable for him, and not all the time. For example, the abilities that increased mana consumption to increase the power of spells. In the past, when his mana was low and his mana recovery was too slow, he had to use them according to the situation. Now that he had advanced to Radiant Moon, he could use them whenever he wanted. The system was adjusting Duque's spells all the time. This was how there was Duque, who was invincible in group attacks on the battlefield. After killing a lot, there would naturally be a murderous aura. It wasn't that there had to be vengeful spirits haunting that person, but it was a kind of indifference to life, even cruelty. Duque just stood there, and under the pressure of his aura, Jaina couldn't help but take half a step back. And Duque took a big step forward, his heavy footsteps weakening the pride in Jaina's heart. Duque suddenly asked, "Actually, His Majesty Rin doesn't mind me being made a king. Do you know why I didn't?" Jaina found that she actually didn't dare to breathe. "I don't know. The Burning Legion has already begun to move against the world of Azeroth. From Sardra's controlling Medivh to open the Dark Portal, to kill Jaden's deputy attacking Karazhan not long ago. In just 3 years, the world of Azeroth has experienced 2 major crises of destruction." Jaina hugged her, Jordan's staff, and couldn't help but nod. "I have foreseen that the evil power that transcends the mortal world will descend rapidly. In the face of the terrifying power of the demons, worldly power is meaningless. So what if it's as powerful as Rotterdam? Maybe within 10 years, Rotterdam will become history, and the great Rotterdam will also become a ruin." When Duque said this, Jaina shivered, and she had goosebumps. She really couldn't imagine the destruction of the beautiful Rotterdam. She really wanted to refute Duque and say that it was a ridiculous rumor. However, Stormwind City had fallen, Torrential Fortress and Broken Ridge had been destroyed. Even the Rotterdam Palace had been demolished by the Wings of Death. This was unimaginable 100 years ago, no, even 5 years ago. Jaina could only nod. Fraud Du continued, "The only thing that can protect the world of Azeroth from the hands of the demons is the same power that transcends the mortal world. The one who can give you a sense of security is not a man, not a powerful Grand Duke, nor a prince of a big country. Remember, the only thing in your hands is magic." Jaina was extremely surprised. Even now, she couldn't believe that this was said by the person who was supposed to be her husband. However, she had to admit that if even the kingdom couldn't be trusted, then only magic could save her. At this time, Duque suddenly grabbed Jaina's wrist, and a strange magic wrapped around both of them. Teleportation. When Jaina recovered from the dizziness of the long-distance teleportation, she was shocked to find herself in a world of ice and snow. Chapter 672. Whoosh! It's so cold. The biting cold wind made Jaina shiver. Even though she was a mage who specialized in ice magic, she couldn't help but shiver when she suddenly came from the warm Karazhan living room to the cold north. She was wearing very little. It was mid-February, and the harsh winter had yet to recede. The mountains and trees in the distance were all covered in white. Apart from the mountains, there were only trees. For Jaina, who had no experience in surviving in the wild, it was like she was at a loss. Jaina was a little confused. Where was this? At this time, Duque's voice sounded in Jaina's ear. Ah! This gave Jaina a shock. At the same time, the sleeveless design of the moon cloth robe was a trap for Jaina. She couldn't help but almost instinctively hug her other arm and rub it hard. This is the northern mountainous area of the Tirisful woodland. Duque's blue and white mage robe fluttered in the cold wind. The Tirisful woodland? The clever Jaina suddenly thought of something, and her little face instantly turned pale. Yes. The first lesson I'm giving you is survival. How to survive in this world that will soon become incomparably terrible. The requirements for the first lesson are not high. With your current equipment, you can survive in the Tirisful woodland infested with orcs for 24 hours. What? When Jaina heard this, she almost cried out in grievance. Letting a little girl like her, who had never lived independently, stay in the dangerous forest of orcs for 24 hours without winter clothes, food, assistance, or any heating equipment. Wasn't this bullying? Tears quickly gathered in the corner of Jaina's beautiful eyes. That pitiful appearance, for a moment, almost made Duque's heart soften. But the best actor was still the best actor. Duque pretended to be magnanimous and asked, "Are you afraid?" "Yes." Jaina suddenly looked up, and a hint of surprise flashed in her wronged eyes. "Oh. So Duque was just giving me a show of strength to scare me." Duke waved his hand, and after a short incantation, an illusory portal as tall as a person opened. Just as Jaina was about to step in, her body suddenly froze as if she had been hit by a petrifying spell. Jaina would recognize this scene even if she turned into ashes. On the other side of the door was Kul Tiras. "As long as you promise to tell His Majesty Proudmoore that you don't want to learn from me, then you can walk through this door, return to your warm home, and be your Princess Ku Tiras." Duque spoke very slowly, but each word was like a knife that cut into Jaina's heart. It wasn't that no one had reminded Jaina that Duque didn't like her and didn't want to marry her. He didn't even want to take her as his disciple. However, the smoke glove that even Antonidas was envious of made the young Jaina forget about it in her excitement. Now it seemed that it was true. "That's right, I can go back, but what about after I go back?" He came under Duque's command in the name of becoming his disciple, but he was chased away because he couldn't endure the tough training. It would be strange if her father didn't skin her alive for this kind of humiliation. In the future, let alone Antonidas, no archmage in Dalajan would accept her as a disciple. Thinking of this, Jaina's mouth was full of bitterness. Did she have a choice? Jaina bowed impeccably and used a respectful tone. "No, Teacher Marcus, I am your student. I came to Karazhan to receive your teachings. If you think that survival in the wild is very helpful for my growth, then I accept your trial. 24 hours, right? I hope you can come and pick me up on time." "I promise to be on time in 24 hours. Duque raised his chin. "One more question." "Ask." "What if there's a danger that I can't handle? Do you remember your brother Drake's coming-of-age ceremony when he was 16? Your father only gave him a dagger and pushed him into a pool with an adult shark." Jaina had goosebumps. When she was a child, she grew up listening to the great achievements of her father and brother. Only when she was a little older did she understand how dangerous it was. In the face of a shark's attack in the sea, the only way to survive was to use the dagger to stab the shark's nose the moment the shark pounced, then use the dagger to twist the shark's head so that the body could escape the shark's bite range. Otherwise, if the shark's sharp teeth grazed the body, the skin would be torn open on the spot, and the wound might even get infected and die. Jaina's whole body was trembling, but after a few seconds, she finally calmed down and bowed again. "I understand, teacher. May I ask one last question?" "Yes." "Did you experience something similar back then?" "Yes." "Then I have no problem. What you can do back then, I can also do." Jaina's blue eyes flashed with determination. "Very good," Duke said and disappeared in front of her with a teleportation. "It's so cold." Jaina exhaled a mouthful of white fog and realized that she had to find some clothes first. Otherwise, she would freeze to death in less than an hour, not to mention 24 hours. The only good thing was that she was wearing standard made shoes today and not high heels for banquets. At least when faced with bad mountain roads, she would not be so desperate that she had to take off her shoes to walk. In a cave on the mountainside 500 meters away, looking at the dazed Jaina in the snow, a beautiful elf combed her golden hair that had been messed up by the wind. She turned back and smiled. "Duque, you're really cruel." "You think so too?" Aurelia laughed. "This is too cruel for a 14-year-old girl. Don't you know? Today is her birthday. Pfft. Jaina's birthday is Valentine's Day. What the hell is this? Duque really did not know if this was how it was in the original history, or if it was because he had transmigrated that he had become like this. Alright, she could hate if she wanted to. It was better than her following the original trajectory of becoming a girl who sold her father. Duque pulled Aurelia into his arms, feeling the female elf's warmth. Jaina is undoubtedly a true genius. She has the talent to grow to become a Breaking Dawn wizard. But there is no lack of geniuses in this world, and only 1 in 10,000 can reach the peak in the end. The female elf's eyes flickered. Because geniuses all die from their own pride, laziness, or misfortune on the path of growth. Yes. That's not right either. I just don't want her to become that terrible woman who sold her father and the Alliance. Below, Jaina turned in a daze in the cold wind. Suddenly, she was pleasantly surprised to see smoke. The rising smoke could be seen clearly even from several kilometers away. Chapter 673. Someone's there. Looking at the rising smoke drifting into the distance, Jaina's heart was ignited with a raging flame of hope. That's her life-saving straw. The moon cloth was very tough, and Jaina could not tear it to make herself more agile. She could only pull the hem of the robe that was almost touching the ground to her thighs. Because she did not know how to tie a knot, she could only hold the staff in one hand and the robe in the other as she hastened her pace. The cold wind seeped into the robe, and Jaina felt even colder. Bastard Duque! Bastard Duque! How dare you treat me like this? It's fine if you don't want to marry me, but if you do, I swear I will take revenge on you. However, no matter how much she cursed in her heart, it was useless. In the winter forest, there was nothing but silence. There were no insects, no birds chirping. Other than the sound of the wind that sounded like the wailing of ghosts, there was no other sound. At first, Jaina was still wondering if she should move forward cautiously, but the cold wind was like a whip lashing at her back and her exposed arms. If she did not rub herself, a thin layer of frost would form on her arms in just 2 minutes. Jaina ran wildly in the rugged forest. Because she was not agile enough, she fell down no less than 5 times. However, her instinct to survive was urging her to continue running. Closer. Closer. It was getting closer. She saw the smoke drifting into the distance getting thicker and thicker. What a big fire. Is this a bonfire party? But it's broad daylight now. Jaina could already see the road. It was a forest path that the villagers had walked for countless years. Although it was not comparable to the Dalajan's perfect fancy tiles, nor could it compare to the so-called cement road that traversed the entire elven forest, it was many times better than the bumpy forest filled with tree roots and gravel. Finally out of the forest, the view in front of her suddenly opened up. Hello. Is anyone here? Yes. Jaina immediately covered her mouth with her empty left hand, and tears of panic flowed uncontrollably from her eyes. Someone. But they were all dead people. In front of Jaina was a hellish scene. This was obviously a village that had been attacked not long ago. Because it was winter and the wind was against the wind, Jaina couldn't smell the stench of rotting corpses. But now, her vision, smell, taste, hearing, and skin were all at the same time, giving her a shock that exceeded her psychological limits. The burning house still had embers that had not been extinguished, and black smoke billowed out of it. The gate that had been forcefully smashed through was a huge human figure. There were also some scattered food on the ground. It was a mess everywhere. Because of the ice and snow, every corpse maintained the appearance they had when they died. Their fear, anger, and unwillingness before death were all frozen on their faces. There was still a small piece of green skin in the loyal domestic dog's mouth, but the rest of the body below the head had been eaten clean by the battle wolf. The old man who raised his pitchfork to protect his old boss had his head crushed. The father, who had clearly been chopped in half, used the last of his strength to reach out and grab his wife and son. The mother, who was hugging her child, had half her body smashed by a heavy weapon. A baby who had been gnawed by an ogre until it no longer looked like a human. These were all done by the orcs. Jaina saw an orc corpse covered in wounds. Beside the corpse were 7 or 8 fallen militia. It seemed that this was the only achievement of the village's militia. The lack of food forced the Warsong orcs hiding in the depths of the forest of Tirisfal to attack the human settlements in the forest. She could no longer control herself. Blurg, blurg. The bread, pastries, and fragrant milk that she had eaten early in the morning were all vomited out by Jaina. For the first time in her life, Jaina felt so uncomfortable. The churning feeling in her stomach made her feel like she was going to vomit last night's dinner. After vomiting for a while, until her stomach was empty, until she felt the coldness of death again, Jaina realized that if she did not do something, she would very likely become a cold corpse like them. I have to do something, Jaina told herself. Resisting the nausea and discomfort, Jaina stood up and forced herself to enter this shuraba to find anything that could help her survive. The orcs took almost everything that could be eaten. They rudely broke into every room and smashed open the basement of every house. Because of their huge size, they burst every door, turning every house into ruins full of holes. Fortunately, Gianna found 2 thick blankets in a cupboard under the stairs, and then under one of the beds she found 2 hunks of brown bread that she had never looked at before. She did not know how to make a living with flint, but fortunately, she was a qualified earth mage. She came to a messy basement, piled up the wooden blocks, and started a fire with a fireball spell. Then, she put a blanket under it and wrapped herself in it. It was a little warmer this way. After an unknown amount of time, she could no longer hold back her hunger. Finally, she boiled snow water in an iron pot and cracked open the black bread. After soaking it in the water, she forced herself to swallow it. She would probably never forget the terrible taste for the rest of her life. In a daze, she fell asleep. She was woken up by the noise. Is anyone here? Is anyone still alive? The standard Lordaeron accent was not something the orcs could imitate. Jaina rushed out of the cellar in surprise and saw a group of Lordaeron cavalry. Praise the holy light. The leader was obviously a holy knight. He had already given up hope for this destroyed town. He did not expect to find a survivor, and it seemed like it was the first noble lady. Oh! Thank you, Ancestor Sorodin. Jaina was also very excited. She had long forgotten about surviving for 24 hours. How did you? Before she could greet him, Jaina suddenly heard a strange, small sound. Whoosh, less than half a meter in front of Jaina. A cavalry beside her was shot in the neck by a wooden spear that came out of nowhere. The impact of the spear was so strong that Jaina watched in shock as the tip of the spear entered from the left and came out from the right. It almost broke the cavalry's entire neck. Looking at the tilted head and feeling the warm blood from the wound on the cavalry's neck, Jaina finally could not help but scream. Ah! The holy knight raised his shield and blocked another spear. He shouted, Orcs! This was Jaina's first Valentine's Day in her life, and it was also a bloody Valentine's Day. Chapter 674. Countless orcs suddenly jumped out of the snow outside the town. They shouted in the orc language that humans could not understand, and roared as they charged towards the Rotterdam cavalrymen that consisted of only about 60 people. Apart from the orcs, there were also many slender, white-skinned frost trolls. If not for that round of spear throwing just now, the cavalry could have broken out of the encirclement with their warhorses. Unfortunately, at least 70% of the warhorses were pierced by the spears, and they neighed in pain in a pool of blood. The remaining cavalry had no choice but to use their warhorses as cover and form a circular formation to resist. If it was a battle on the battlefield, 100 orcs and trolls against 60 highly mobile cavalries, the outcome of the battle would still be unknown. When the cavalry was forced to become infantry, and had to use the smaller kite shields of the cavalry to form a circular formation, the outcome was decided. Jaina was sprayed with blood, and she was completely stunned. Some people would scream hysterically in the face of danger. They could not do anything, and would even disturb their companions, making a mess of things. Some people would show extreme survival instincts at such a moment. Like a drowning person, they would grab onto anyone they could grab, and crave for a chance to survive. There were also some people who would become calm and decisive after extreme panic. There was one last type of person who could guide their companions out of a predicament that would lead them to death. The last type of person was extremely rare, and people often called them generals. It was obvious that Jaina Proudmoore was a natural commander. In just a second, Jaina came to her senses, and shouted, "Go to the church. The church is made of stone." The paladin who was the leader suddenly understood what Jaina meant. Jaina's judgment was correct. If they did not have suitable defensive measures, the 60 of them would basically die in a single charge from the orcs. Hiding in the cellar was useless. Firstly, the cellar was not that big, and secondly, the orcs' demolition ability was beyond the imagination of most people. The orcs did not even need to use hammers to demolish houses made of ordinary bricks and wood. They could just knock it down with their arms. The so-called defense of a fortified position did not work on the orcs at all. The church was different. For some reason, the church in this town was made of bluestone, and was rather sturdy. Go. Listen to this lady. It would take the orcs at most half a minute to rush from the outskirts of the town to the town. They would be able to get there in a daze. Jaina's shout was definitely a life-saving move. The cavaliers of the Rotterdam Kingdom supported their teammates, and almost rushed into the church in the middle of the town before the orcs surrounded them. Blarg! Jaina wanted to vomit again. The church was a sacred place for the people of Lordaeron. People would naturally come to the church to seek salvation in times of danger. Unfortunately, the orcs had turned this place into a cruel slaughterhouse. Even though the corpse was already frozen, the smell of blood that had just splashed onto Jaina's body stimulated her sense of smell. None of the cavalrymen blamed this seemingly delicate young lady because she had already saved their lives. Some of the cavalrymen dragged the injured comrades deeper into the church, while the uninjured cavalrymen quickly formed a two-layered shield formation at the entrance of the church, which could accommodate 4 people abreast and was as tall as 2 men. Thank the holy light. Thank you, wise lady. The orcs were still aggressive, but compared to setting up a formation in the middle of the town, which had a complicated terrain, the church that only needed to defend the front door was simply a holy land. There was also a side door made of bluestone that could only allow 1 human to pass through. 2 of them were enough to guard the door tightly. The orcs immediately launched an attack on the human soldiers of the church. They smashed their huge hammers over, and even with the defense of the shields, they easily broke the arm of a cavalryman. As the price, the orc died in the next moment after being stabbed by at least 7 swords of the knights. The tragic battle was going on, and the cavalrymen were constantly injured and dragged into the church by their companions. However, there were more orcs who had fallen. The cavalrymen, who were obviously veterans of the war, were extremely brave. In just 5 minutes, they had killed more than 30 orcs, and only 7 of them were lightly injured, while 3 of them were seriously injured. However, there were more orcs outside. The green heads were densely packed, forming a surging green ocean. It seemed that there were at least hundreds of orcs here. A cavalryman with a broken arm took out a short-barreled flintlock and fired a shot into the sky. Accompanied by an ear-piercing sound, a dazzling red signal flare soared into the sky. It could be clearly seen even 10 kilometers away. Looking at Jaina's blank expression, the cavalryman smiled. The thing sent by the Stormwind people is called a signal flare, which is specially used by our alliance to call for help. Although we don't like that damn Duque, but the thing he invented is still useful. Another cavalryman, who could no longer stand, panted and laughed. Come on, we still have to wait for the Stormwind elven women to come and save us. Elven women? Jaina did not react for a moment. The elven rangers belonging to Grand Duke Marcus of Stormwind. Although their noses are pointed at the sky, they are absolutely strong in forest battles. Our people won't be able to make it in time, so we have to see if there are any elven rangers in the vicinity. If there are no reinforcements, we won't last until nightfall. The cavalryman with a broken arm smiled bitterly. Jaina gritted her teeth. That's not necessarily true, I'm still here. You. Under the disbelieving gazes of the cavalryman, Jaina gritted her teeth, rolled up the hem of her mooncloth robe, took a step forward with her fair and tender legs, and stood on the back of the church's pew. Be careful of the troll's spears. Before the cavalryman finished speaking, he was stunned to find that there was an illusory translucent cover around Jaina. Holy light, she's actually a Sir Wizard. The cavalryman guarding at the front also suddenly noticed the flames coming from behind them. Before they had time to turn their heads, a cold female voice sounded, Fireball. Bang. With a loud sound, a huge fireball with a long tail of flames flew over the cavalryman's shield formation and exploded in the midst of the densely packed beastmen. Ah, ayo. The beastmen were clearly in an uproar. They watched in horror as several of their companions struggled in the flames and rolled on the cold ground. Some beastmen tried to help their companions put out the flames. They very professionally took off their animal skin clothes and patted them on their companions' bodies. This was useless. Before the fire weakened a little, the burning beast men had already returned to the embrace of their ancestors. Bang. Another fireball. This time, 4 or 5 beast men were hit. Their screams in the flames terrified their companions. Chapter 675. Unknowingly, the orcs began to disperse. Hooray! Praise you! Great Ms. Mage! The cavalryman's morale was greatly boosted. Who would have thought that the dainty noble lady they saved would be a mage? The leader of the paladins said, Thank you for buying more time for us. Just to buy more time. If there's only one entrance, I can guard it for 3 days and 3 nights. Feeling the terrifying magic damage and mana recovery bonus of the smoke glove, Jaina decided to use a wall of fire to resist the orcs' attack. In fact, Jaina did just that. After 5 seconds of chanting, a huge wall that was 10 meters wide and 2 meters tall appeared in front of the church. More than 20 orcs were immediately affected by the flames and turned into burning human-shaped torches. The cavalryman cheered, but the paladin smiled bitterly. Why? Do you have a problem with my magic? Jaina asked the leader angrily. If it were orcs from other clans, this might be enough to scare them. Unfortunately, this is the most elite warsong clan in the tribe. Almost all of the cavalrymen's bodies trembled. Even Jaina was a little familiar with the name Warsong Clan. Yes. The Warsong Clan. The Warsong Clan had made a name for themselves since Southshore. They dared to fight flamethrowers head-on, destroyed the Silverpine Forest, and even fought their way to Rotterdam. The Warsong orcs dispersed, but it didn't take long for Jaina and the others to know what they were doing. All of a sudden, there was a loud sound of glass shattering above their heads. Then, there was a second sound, a third sound, dozens of times. Countless torches were thrown in, smashing the glass windows on both sides of the church, which were at least 2 people high above the ground, and landing on the ground inside the church. Because many parts of the church were already covered in frost, it did not cause a fire. It only caused chaos among the injured cavalrymen. When a few brave cavalrymen climbed to a high and narrow window to peek outside, a cavalryman almost had his head pierced by a spear. In the next moment, there was an earth-shattering sound from all directions of the church. Bang! 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 The dull sound of the collision was like the knell of the Grim Reaper. The paladin cursed, "Damn it! I knew they would use the tree trunk as a battering ram." That's right, the orcs used their great strength to break the trees in the town, uprooting them and using them as siege walls. Although the church was made of bluestone, it was not a fortress. In fact, unless it was a fortress made of cement, most traditional fortresses were useless. He could only become the victim of this group of people who believed in strength creates miracles. She had clearly crashed into the walls of the church, but the sound that sounded like a landslide made Jaina feel as if the trees had directly crashed into her chest, flattening her ribs. Her lungs, which had shrunk into her lungs, could no longer expand and breathe in fresh air. Fight to the death. The holy knight raised his war hammer high up in the air without any hesitation. Fight to the death. Even the wounded struggled to get up and raised their weapons high up. Jaina did not expect that she would be in a desperate situation in just a few minutes. Bang! Bang! Bam! The orcs outside were very professional. They stopped when they were about to smash a wall. They were waiting for more breakout points to be ready. The strict management of these orcs made it hard to believe that they were just a barbarian race from a distant planet. Finally, with a rough command, more than 10 holes were blasted on both sides of the church. Every hole perfectly avoided the pillars of the church. Almost at the same time, more than 10 slender trolls jumped onto the high windows of the church, holding sharp spears in their hands. 2 long fangs were wriggling in their wide-open mouths, and they had cruel smiles on their faces. He he he. Loktar. Amidst the flying debris and dust, the burly orcs charged in, brandishing their huge weapons and roaring in a hoarse voice. Jaina, who was wrapped in a white barrier, was the main target. She only had time to use Flame Blast to send an orc flying, and the next moment, more than 10 spears were thrown at her. Jaina still managed to use Flash in her panic. The place where she stood half a second ago was nailed with countless spears. Half a second later, she was not so lucky. The 5 spears that followed behind easily pierced through her magic barrier. Ah, Jaina finally let out a scream as if she was dying. She used her arms to protect herself in vain. Duque. I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. Jaina cursed before she died. At the very last moment, a miracle happened without any warning. Jaina's gloves suddenly burst out with a dazzling arcane light. Time seemed to freeze. Jaina opened her eyes, and her clear pupils were filled with shock. Roar, a fierce and majestic roar came from Jaina's gloves. The wooden spears that were thrown at her silently turned into sawdust, then into powder, and disappeared in the air. Along with this inhuman roar, everyone on the battlefield, be it the orcs who raised their war hammers and the human cavalrymen who had lost their arms and were about to use their remaining arm to stab their long swords, all froze in place. At this moment, everyone felt their strength and courage escaping from their bodies with fear in their hearts. They had a premonition that something was about to descend. It was a mysterious existence with unstoppable power. When it descended, it would dominate everything and take over the entire battlefield. In the blink of an eye, everyone knew who that it was. A huge illusory magic flag made of purplish-blue arcane energy rose from Jaina's gloves. The flag was so huge that it actually surpassed the entire church and rose outside the church. The orcs and cavalrymen subconsciously raised their heads to look at the flag. Then, be it in a very non-standard common language or a thick Lordaeran accent, the orcs and cavalrymen all said the same name, Duke Marcus. As if hearing the call of the hundreds of thousands of people, a blue light suddenly lit up beside Jaina. Before everyone could react, a young man in a blue and white mage robe stood beside Jaina who was kneeling on the ground. With one hand holding Jaina's arm, Duque laughed and said, "Ah. You still activated the last insurance on the smoke glove after all." Chapter 676. Final insurance. Jaina's beautiful blue eyes widened. Although she wanted to pretend to be moved to tears and snot after being rescued, in the end, Duke Marcus. You're a complete bastard. If she could bite Duque to death, she would definitely be willing to tear off Duque's flesh bit by bit. The current Jaina was far from the scheming and shrewd strong woman of the future, and this little lady could not help but fly into a rage. Unfortunately, her threatening actions were destined to be suppressed by Duque. That's right, she really attacked Duque. A flame blast flew towards Duque's face. If Duque was an ordinary person, Jaina's attack would definitely make Duque's mother unable to recognize him. Unfortunately, Duque was a radiant moon mage. Such a low concentration of magical elements would naturally dissipate when it came into contact with the elements around Duque's body. Jaina had indeed calculated this. Unfortunately, what she did not expect was that Duque actually retaliated. That's right. The moment before Jaina's flame blast was released, teacher Duque actually retaliated with a magic counter, without the demeanor of a senior. The so-called magic counter was to instantly mobilize the elemental power in the atmosphere to disrupt the balance and circulation of the opponent's magic circuit. If it happened to counter the opponent's magic while they were casting, it would cause the opponent's entire magic circuit to be in a state of chaos for at least 8 seconds. This was only for mages of the same rank. Duque, a radiant moon, bullying an earth mage was simply shameless to the extreme. The magic circuit in her body instantly became chaotic, and Jaina almost fainted on the spot. Cough cough cough. The poor expired lowly choked. It was impossible for her to recover without more than a minute, and this was under the premise that she was not continuously disturbed. On the other hand, Duque's appearance undoubtedly caused an earthquake. The Lordaeron cavalry cheered thunderously. The beast men, on the other hand, were like insects avoiding a disaster, hurriedly fleeing from the town. Run! It's that devil Duque. Even the bravest warsong beast men lost their will to fight in the face of this storm flag that represented terror and death. Duque's flag represented a terrifying legend that could not be broken by the orcs. Duque's flag was like a haze that shrouded the entire beastman race. With Duque's storm flag, the beastmen would never be able to win. Although none of the beastmen were willing to admit this, Duque had turned these conclusions into reality every time. This time was no exception. Suddenly, a cold current spread out in a circular shape with the church as the center. The cold wind blew past, and the stones on the ground seemed to tremble. They spun strangely, and even followed the tiny gravel into the air. It wasn't that there was a supernatural phenomenon of anti-gravity on the ground, but that the cold air that shot up into the sky was too vast and frightening. In less than 3 seconds, the entire town with a diameter of 500 meters was covered by the cold air. The beastmen who were trying to escape took large strides, but their lower bodies were frozen in a ridiculous position, because a wave of frost had quietly frozen their lower bodies. Ah ah ah! No, ancestor! Save me! All sorts of cries sounded in the beastman language. At this moment, the Lordaeron cavalry was shocked to find that the cold air had perfectly avoided every one of them. Regardless of whether they were in Duque's sight, or whether they were close to the beastmen, only the beastmen were hit, and the cavalry less than 20 centimeters away were unharmed. Jaina's expression of shock also froze on her face. What kind of control is this? Duque raised his right hand lightly, and snapped his fingers elegantly. Snap! It sounded like the opening of the gates of hell. At least 300 illusory palms made of arcane energy suddenly appeared in the air. Magician's hand! Jaina exclaimed, seeing Duque for the first time. Every cavalier of the Rotterdam kingdom held their breath at this moment. No, the beastmen were terrified, waiting in despair for the final judgment of death. Countless arcane missiles poured down like a torrential downpour. Every high-ranked arcane missile shot by a radiant moon great wizard had the destructive power of a ballista. Under Jaina's incredulous gaze, just as the cavalry opened their mouths in shock, the beastman army that could easily drown them was easily crushed. Jaina was very reluctant to use the word crushed to describe the shocking scene before her eyes. However, it was the most suitable word. The heavy hammer that could easily smash a cavalry's kite shield turned into metal scraps after coming into contact with an arcane missile. The burly beastmen that were 2.5 meters tall were easily blown into pieces like broken puppets. Broken fangs, bulging eyeballs, rainbow-colored brain matter, innards that couldn't be described, and broken bones that were scarlet with a hint of white. If the church was a slaughterhouse of the past, then what was presented in front of Jaina now was an uncensored live broadcast of a slaughter. Blarg. Jaina had thought that she couldn't vomit anymore, but she didn't expect that when her stomach was empty, she could still vomit yellow bile. After vomiting with much difficulty, Jaina's body trembled as she finally spat out, "Duque, you bastard. Don't even think of marrying me in this life." Duque smiled, as if his plan had succeeded. "Very good. Very powerful. I like what you said." Jaina almost fainted from anger at Duque. There were no beast men left. No. There was one left. A beast man that was clearly more muscular than the others had 2 broken arms, and was kneeling in pain near the entrance of the church. The crippled beast man struggled to stand up. He glared with bloodshot eyes and roared. Unexpectedly, he spoke in the standard human language. "Why? Why? Duke Marcus. Why didn't you kill me?" Jaina and all the cavalrymen looked at Duque in shock. To be able to kill hundreds and thousands of beast men with such precision, and yet only break the arms of this beast man, it was obvious that Duque did it on purpose. Duque let go of Jaina's arm and walked to the entrance of the church with his hands behind his back. On the stairs, he raised his chin 45 degrees and looked down at the tall beast man. "Tell Grom Hellscream. Get out of the Eastern Kingdom. As long as I, Duke Marcus, am here, there will be no place for beast men. If you really piss me off, even if I have more important things to do, I will comb through the Tirisful glades and hang every beast man." Chapter 677. His sonorous and forceful voice reverberated in the sky that had become silent once more, and it was like a blade or a sword that was engraved into the hearts of everyone. Duque could tell that the beast man was a 1,000-man commander. If it was the Warsong tribe of the past that had hundreds of thousands of warriors, a 1,000-man commander would not even be in the list. Now that the tribe had been crushed and most of the remaining beast men had fled back to the dark portal, losing 1,000 men was enough to make Grom's heart ache. It was not that Duque did not want to exterminate the Warsong beast men. Unfortunately, the beast men had found a way to deal with the Alliance, digging tunnels. Their main camp was in the future Hearth Valley, which was mostly mountainous. Then, the Warsong beast men who had awakened a strange talent almost hollowed out the mountain. If he faced Grom Hellscream on flat ground or in a forest, the current Duque had at least a 70% chance of killing him. With the help of the Windrunner sisters, it was 90%. In a place like the tunnels, where only the brave would win, if he did not drag corpses to revive, Duque would not even have a 20% chance of winning. The only fortunate thing was that the beast men were not a race that was good at self-sufficiency. Their large demand for meat meant that they had to frequently come out of the tunnels to forage for food. Whether it was hunting or attacking human villages. Duque did have the ability to exterminate the Warsong beast men, but that would require him to mobilize at least 30,000 dwarves and 50,000 human soldiers. If he did nothing and surrounded Grom for a year and a half, the Warsong tribe would have to kneel no matter what. Unfortunately, the price was too high, and it was not in line with the interests of Stormwind City and Iron Furnace Castle. This was why Duque could let the Windrunner army continue to bleed the Warsong beast men, but could not exterminate the Warsong tribe. Duque knew that if he let this beast man with 2 broken arms go back, there would be a smaller version of Kargath Bladefist. Duque did not care. As long as he could exert enough psychological pressure on the future core figure of the tribe, that was enough. As expected, the beast man was on the verge of collapse. "Ah, bastard! Duke Marcus. One day, the tribe will make you pay." The orc Chiliarch roared like a wounded beast. "Ha ha ha ha." Duque laughed maniacally. "Your first great chieftain, Blackhand, is no good. Not the second great chieftain. Wait until you elect the third great chieftain to come and die. I will use your blood to tell you who the eternal nightmare of the tribe is." "Ha ha ha ha." Duke's laughter was very arrogant and presumptuous. To the orcs, it was the laughter of a devil standing at the peak of evil. In the ears of humans, there was an indescribable sense of pride. Unknowingly, every cavalryman of the Rotterdam kingdom straightened their backs. Even though they were injured and their broken arms were still hurting, their hearts were filled with heroism. That's right. Duke Marcus. Only such a heroic man could be called a hero of the Alliance. Only such a brave and wise man could annihilate the millions of orcs. As expected, Duke was the flag of the Alliance. Unknowingly, the eyes of the Rotterdam Kingdom's cavalrymen were filled with tears. Jaina was a little dazed. She hated this feeling. She knew that it was that bastard Duque who pushed her to this barren north. She knew very well that this town that was attacked by the tribe must have been lured here by Duque. It could be said that she was forced into danger because of Duque's scheme. A terrifying commander who could toy with millions of orcs in the palm of his hand. It would be too fake to say that he did not even think of this. And this fellow, who did not look remorseful, did not seem to want to deny this. She should hate him for messing up her first Valentine's Day and her dream of a perfect 14th birthday. After thinking it through, she realized that Duque was telling her that this was the orc tribe that her father and the entire Kurtira's kingdom had been fighting for the past 2 years. This was the battlefield that her brother, Drake, had sacrificed his life for. And she. Perhaps this was in line with one of her dreams. Duque did not seem to treat her as a political tool, nor did he treat her as a woman. Instead, he nurtured her as an important mage in the Alliance. Jaina did not know whether to laugh or cry. However, Duke was able to use Army Destroyer all by himself. Such a mighty figure caused Jaina's heart to flutter. Because at this moment, Duque and the legendary hero Duque had silently overlapped. More specific, more clear. Ah, the orc Chiliarch left in a very manly way. He pressed his bleeding arms against one of the hammers that Jaina had just burned red. The high temperature quickly scorched his wounds and stopped the bleeding. Obviously, this was something he had learned in the Silverpine Forest that was like a fiery hell. The paladin captain who led the team came over and bowed to Duque respectfully. Greetings, Your Excellency. I am the captain of the 3rd Garrison of Tirisful, Baron Thorad Cashin. Excuse me, are you Grand Duke Marcus? That's me. Thank you for your help. Without you, perhaps we would have all been wiped out. Then he glanced at Jaina, who was covered in blood. I'm sorry to disturb you, but can I ask what's going on? Because of a mistake in the teleportation spell, Princess Jaina Proudmoore accidentally came to Tirisful Forest. It was you who bravely protected Princess Proudmoore under the siege of 1,000 orcs until Grand Duke Marcus arrived. Brave warriors, you not only fought against the evil orcs, but also protected the beautiful princess. You did a good job and deserve a reward. Duque took out a piece of craft paper and a quill, patted it on the wall, scribbled down the general process, and stamped his own seal. Take this to your commander, or even to His Majesty Menethil. You will be rewarded. Lordairons and Kul Tiras. And this is my small private reward. Duque took out a bag of gold coins for the paladin and a pair of paladin gloves made by the dwarves of Iron Stove Castle. Cashin and his men were immediately moved. Jaina. The little princess of Kul Tiras was so angry that her teeth itched. It was Duque who had deliberately dug a pit for her to jump in, and even included the cavalry in the pit. They had worked for you, but you made it seem as if Jaina's spell mistake had caused them to suffer heavy losses. But as smart as she was, of course, she would not expose Duque on the spot. After politely thanking him, she teleported back to Karazhan with Duke, even quieter than a well-behaved wife. Chapter 678. After Duke and Jaina went out, in Karazhan, Jaina's maids and attendants were all discussing it in private. The soul of gossip that had existed since ancient times was burning. Do you think that the Grand Duke and Her Highness will do that? Definitely. no one can resist Her Highness's charm. Now that Her Highness is the only princess left in the world, any normal man would know what to do. I still don't think they will go straight to home plate. That's hard to say. Isn't the Lake of Wind in the East Elven Forest beautiful? What if the scenery is too beautiful? Yeah. Back then, I was mesmerized by the scenery of the sea, and then I lost my chastity to that bastard Anthony. Hey! I heard that His Majesty Proudmoore and Miss Golden Sword also had sex on the ship back then. Sylvanas, who was not far away, sneered when she heard this. She turned around and teased Elusia, "Yo, little Elusia, aren't you afraid that Duque will act impulsively and let little Jaina come ashore first?" Hee hee. Elusia shook her head firmly. "Sister Sylvanas, you also know about Duque's plan. I'm just afraid that Duque will go too far and not know how to keep it." Queen Sylvanas smirked. "That's not necessarily true. Our Duque is so popular. Besides, that playboy, didn't he hide a real princess before?" Sure. Elusia raised her index finger in front of her lips and nervously made a shushing gesture. Pfft, they are not elves who can hear the whispers of the wind. Queen Sylvanas shrugged indifferently. "I really don't know what's so good about Duque. Eldest and third sister are like this, and so are you. Everyone is dead set on that kid." Elusia's pretty face turned red. He. Hey. Do you want to make a bet with me? Let's bet on whether Duque will do anything to little Jaina. Let's bet. Elusia agreed a little angrily. What's the bet? Sylvanas asked with a hint of mockery. Let's bet on him doing something within his power. All right. Just as the two of them made their vows, Elusia felt an arcane wave coming from the other side. All of Karazhan was in a state of strict spatial lockdown, especially from the direction of Azeroth. With Duque and Khadgar's efforts, most of the spatial rifts had been moved to the original location of the Knight's Nightmare. It was now guarded by the Einherjar, the Saintess of Chastity, and the giant arcane constructs led by the Curator. The stables, parlor, and ballroom at the main entrance had been refurbished. Even the opera house would be reopened soon. This arcane wave was a portal that could lead directly to the front door. Only Duque and Elusia had the authority to open it. Duque returned with Jaina. Gianna's appearance caused all of Kul Tiraz's maids and servants to cry out in alarm. Your Highness! What's wrong? Jaina's headmaid rushed up in panic, and she glanced suspiciously at Duque. It's not my blood. I'm fine. Jaina, who had calmed down, quickly got to the point. I went through a cruel magic trial, and now I just want to take a good bath. Even though Jaina comforted the maids, her appearance was too horrifying. Her entire upper body was dyed red with blood, as if she had fallen into a pool of blood for an evil ritual and was then fished out. At this moment, even though no one said anything due to Duque's authority, every Kul Tiraz citizen felt a deep resentment towards Duque. What happened to the romance that was promised? What happened to the wonderful Valentine's Day? It's fine if you don't want to date our precious princess, but you even got yourself covered in blood. What the hell is this? Duque ignored the murderous gazes of the maids and shrugged. On the other side, Sylvanas, who came up to greet him, had a slightly pretentious expression of surprise. Is it that bad? Elusia and Khadgar nodded at the same time. Before Jaina could go far, one of the maids beside her had already vomited, because the maids had seen the pieces of internal organs stuck to the back of Jaina's shoulder. Elusia gave Duque a ladylike bow. Seems like it's more suitable for me to go. Although Elusia looked gentle and weak, she had fought thousands of miles with Duque in the past, and had seen even the most tragic of battlefields. She was 100 times better than the maids who had never seen blood. Elusia, this is my loss. Sylvanas was very straightforward. Elusia waved her hand as she left, indicating that she had heard him. In the hall, only Duque and Sylvanas were left. Yo, Duque, you really don't regret what you did? Regret what? His Majesty Dallin handed his daughter over to an archmage who killed the most orcs in the Alliance as a disciple. He should have been mentally prepared for this. Duque looked indifferent. You're really willing to be so cruel to such a delicate little girl? Queen Sylvie put her hands on her hips in surprise. Is this still the Duke Marcus who used to be obsessed with beautiful women, who gave magic roses everywhere and used magic to please girls? Duque blushed. Alright, stop teasing me. Times have changed. Maybe there will be 2 to 5 years of peace, but the symphony of destruction has already begun. First, Jaina does have the talent to be a hero. Second, the one who can stand by my side in the end must be a powerful woman who can protect herself in any crisis. Servanas was not stupid. She immediately realized that she was in Duque's hunting range. Bastard! Do you want to kill all 4 of us Windrunner sisters? Do you want to die? I'll say this first, I don't like you. Don't flatter yourself. Duque touched his nose awkwardly. I didn't say that. Humph. That's good. Servanas turned around, showing the back of Duke's head, and left without saying anything. On the other side, in the bathroom of Karazhan, Jaina could not count on the maid. She could only ask her best friend and spy Duque sent, Elucia, to wash her body. She washed her body with warm water over and over again, but no matter how she washed, she could still feel the disgusting smell of blood in her nostrils. Human, orc, the cavalryman whose neck was pierced by a spear, the warriors who died in front of her, the orcs who were smashed into pieces by Duque's magic, everything that happened today uncontrollably replayed in her mind. Jaina shrunk her body and put half her face in the water. She blew bubbles out of boredom. Poof 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 poof. The next moment, an illusion appeared in Jaina's vision. She was not soaking in clean water, but in a pool of blood. Wretch! Jaina hurriedly got up and vomited again. Chapter 679. Are you alright? Elucia patted Jaina's back lightly. Maybe I wasn't used to it at first. When I saw the battlefield for the first time, my reaction was similar to yours. I went back and threw up for 2 days. Damn it. Duque ruined my Valentine's Day and my birthday. Jaina looked like she wanted to eat Duque alive. I'll remember him for the rest of my life. Elucia could only shrug helplessly. She could not speak up for Duque. Of all the days, he had to pick a time like this. Wasn't this just torturing people? Elucia sighed. Yes, yes, yes. Little Jaina, it'd be best if you could beat him up with magic in the future. He's really despicable sometimes. Jaina was very smart. She could tell from a few words that Elucia was still on Duque's side. She had an indescribably strange feeling. Was this her best friend who was likely to snatch her man? Jaina decided to wait and see. Here, tell me more about Duque. Why, are you starting to give in to him? No, to conquer an enemy, one must first fully understand him. Alright, so she had already become an enemy. Then. Duque, don't blame me for selling you out. Of course, I don't believe that Jaina at this level can handle you. At this moment, in the master bedroom on the highest floor of Karazhan, Duque had returned with Aurelia and Sasha. Sylvanas continued to command the Windrunners Rangers in place of them. Sasha rushed over like a bird returning to its nest and gave Duque a kiss. Duque, I'm so happy. When you made this Valentine's Day, I almost thought you were going to make a festival in Stormwind just for Jaina's arrival. Aurelia took off her white coat and laughed. If this is also Valentine's Day, then this must be a bloody Valentine's Day. Sasha tacitly stepped aside to let her elder sister and Duke hug each other. After a round of exchanging words and tongues, Duque brought the 2 sisters to the table that had already been prepared. The nobles basically didn't talk during the meal, and even if they did, they would do so in whispers. But at Duque's place, they didn't have to worry so much. They continued to chat as they ate. Speaking of which, do you really like Jaina's talent that much? Aurelia had always been curious. She didn't understand why Duque was willing to nurture Jaina with all his might, even though he clearly rejected Jaina personally. Duque cut off a small piece of steak and swallowed it. He wiped his mouth with a napkin and said, "First of all, her magic talent is top-notch. She's the same as Ronan, a Breaking Dawn great wizard." From Duque's mouth, this evaluation could not be said to be low. The Windrunner sisters froze. Then, given her identity as a princess, she'll be able to do a lot of things if there are any major changes in the Rotterdam Kingdom in the future. But she had a very special characteristic, and that was that she was too rational. She was used to weighing the value of everything on both ends of the scale. This could be a good thing or a bad thing. In a bad situation, she could be the next great traitor, Pyranod. After hearing this, Aurelia couldn't eat anymore. Then, it doesn't matter. That's why I gave her a strong dose of medicine. Regarding Jaina, Duque had actually thought for a long time. If it was according to the original history of Jaina, Duque would definitely kill her with a stick. Damn it, the so-called alliance with the tribe against the evil forces, this was equivalent to selling Dad, who didn't see the big picture and destroyed the cooperation between the tribe and the alliance, to Rexer and Thrall. When Dad died, he would come out and shed a few drops of tears. Looking at the original history, apart from that time when Mount Hyjal resisted the Arkharans, Jaina mostly flirted with the tribe when she shouldn't have. When she really had to ally with the tribe, Theramore, her life's work, was flattened by the great chief, Braindead Roar, with a nuclear-level magic bomb, focusing Rainbow, causing her to lose her mind. At the end of the day, it was because Jaina was too smart and too rational most of the time, forgetting that human society was ultimately maintained by human emotions. Duque's strong medicine was the brutality of the orcs. In the original timeline, Jaina was younger than she was now. Jaina, who hadn't experienced the war at the Dark Portal, had grown up in the Dalajan, the sealed holy land of magicians. She hadn't seen the brutality of the orcs, so when she first came out after growing up, she felt more sympathy for the orcs who were enslaved by humans. She felt that the orcs were the victims, and she couldn't understand the hatred and bigotry of her father, Dylin, towards the orcs. Now, Duque had taught her a very important lesson in advance. Talent could be cultivated. But heroes couldn't be replicated. Why? It was simple. All education could be repeated, but life experience couldn't be repeated. Even if it was the same trial, exploring an unknown dungeon for the first time and sending people to harvest after the exploration were two completely different levels of tests. Originally, Jaina had been too successful. She had been raised like a Virgin Mary in a greenhouse. Now that Duque told her, "This world is cruel, and if you can't take it, go back and be a greenhouse princess," it would obviously change the course of Jaina's life. That night, when Duque fought with the Windrunner sisters, King Dylin of Kul Tiras received the news. Reading the magic message that was more than 1,000 words long, Dylin was stunned for a long time. His lover, Jaina Kingsword, placed her hands on his shoulders and massaged his shoulders. After Dylin's queen passed away, she was the actual queen. However, she had never tried to stand in front of the throne, nor did she try to make her and Dylin's illegitimate daughter officially join the royal family. She was satisfied with her current position, and she didn't want to cause any trouble for Dylin. Therefore, Dylin trusted her very much. Duque really dared to do it. Dylin was conflicted. He didn't know if he should be angry or laugh. "He's been rejecting me since the beginning. His attitude hasn't changed at all," Jaina reminded Dalen. "I thought he was never a real politician. If he was the kind of man who constantly compromised for political victory, he wouldn't have become the Alliance's hero. Isn't that right?" "Bastard, I want him to be my son-in-law." Jaina laughed. "Now, he's just fulfilling his responsibility as a teacher. Even if you make a scene in the Alliance, no one will support you. Don't forget, you gave him your sword and asked him to fulfill his responsibility as a teacher." Dylin felt like he had shot himself in the foot. "Bastard. I'll teach him a lesson one day." Chapter 680. The third year of the Dark Portal was a relatively peaceful year for the Alliance. Duque continued to teach Jaina viciously. No, he taught her with all his heart. He used a completely different teaching method from the Dalajan mages. In terms of personality building, Duque would bring Jaina to the Tirisful Forest to wipe out the orcs, or to the Swamp of Sorrows to clean up the orcs and various swamp creatures there. Under Duque's torment, the once beautiful princess would often leave the house clean in the morning and come back at night looking like a girl made of mud. Kultira's chief maids and female officers had sent letters of complaint to their countries at first, but they soon realized that even after they had been confirmed and presented to King Daelin, they were still like rocks in the ocean. They also realized that their king had tacitly agreed to all of this. In the field of magic, Duque's teaching method was more like a free-range one. After the system scan, Duque told Jaina that she could learn any type of book in any region. If she couldn't find a book, she could ask a ghost. Oh, ask Khadgar. The bored Khadgar would read magic books every day because he had nothing to do, so he was more proficient than Duque. Of course, Duque always had a way to show off his existence and value. Every time Jaina cultivated a new spell, Duque would always be able to see where Jaina's problem was at a glance, as well as the metamagic abilities on how to cultivate that spell. After a while, no matter how unconvinced Jaina was, she had to admit that this teacher, who was only 4 years older than her, was indeed qualified to teach her. It was now May of the third year of the Dark Portal. It was the end of spring and the beginning of summer, and the cement road that traversed the entire elven forest from east to west was basically completed. With Duque providing the technology and the dwarves doing the work, the railway project that employed a large number of Stormwind workers had officially begun. At the same time, the equally grand reconstruction of Stormwind City was underway. Clayan had once doubted whether it was reliable for a country as weak as Storm Kingdom to carry out 2 projects that cost a lot of money and resources at the same time. In terms of money alone, it had cost more than 10 million gold coins. No one could calculate the amount of money needed for the various small projects. Duque replied, if someone else were to do it, it would be suicide. However, I'm a once-in-a-thousand-year internal affairs genius in Azeroth, so leave it to me. Duque's words were very arrogant, and the ministers were not convinced at first. It had to be said that it was too easy for a university student who knew a little about the market economy to transmigrate to this medieval world. Blindly giving out alms such as disaster relief food and clothing did prevent the worst situation of people starving to death in the beginning. But if you did it too often and for too long, it would produce another result. It was easy to raise lazy people. It wasn't that there weren't any holy people in the world. It was precisely because there were too many mediocre people that people yearned to be saints. On the other hand, if all the people in the world were to live like ascetics, 99% of them would not want it. Duque's approach was to use work as a form of relief. The first step was to make an announcement and directly tell the people that the country had just been destroyed and that the country had no money. In order to let everyone tide over the difficulties and not starve to death, the country had handed over all its savings. A lot of money and supplies were borrowed. It wasn't a simple announcement, but the mayor, village chief, and civil officials everywhere rushed to the people to publicize it almost every day. The second step was to implement the IOU system. The kingdom didn't have that many gold coins in circulation. Fine. IOU. Duque used 3 days to set up a complete IOU system. Those who took the country's disaster relief food in the winter would write an IOU based on the quantity and quality. Those who took cotton-padded clothes would also owe. Those who obtained a new house would owe even more. This was all owed to the kingdom. Then spring came, and it was time to start paying off the debt. When the farming was over, they would have to work for the country according to their own abilities. How much would it cost to build the railway in a day? How much would it cost to join the patrol team? After a while, the people discovered, hey, working for the country to pay off the debt, in the end, they could still get a few more IOU every day, which could be used to exchange for necessary food and daily necessities. The IOU that Duque made couldn't be counterfeited because it was a magic item made by the magic apprentices he recruited. The cost of making the IOU itself far exceeded the value of the IOU itself. As a result, a complete internal circular economic system controlled by the planned economy was formed. It started operating in March for 2 months. When Lang cautiously came to Duque to ask how much the country owed, Duque directly gave him a deficit of 0. Oh, no, it was a lot of surplus. Lang and the ministers of the interior were dumbfounded. Lang was already mentally prepared to sell the land and the state's assets so that the people could live a good life. Anyway, most of the nobles had been wiped out before, and their fiefs had fallen back into the hands of the Rin family. It was still possible to live by selling the land. Now, Duque actually told him that not only did he not suffer a loss, but he also made a huge profit. Lang didn't understand. The ministers of the interior didn't understand either. Duque shook his head as he explained. Let me tell you. IOU is actually gold coins. It's just that I took advantage of everyone's gratitude and secretly lowered their wages. Then I created a market environment where gold coins can't buy things, but IOU can. This caused everyone to unknowingly do a lot more work for the kingdom. Now, we don't need to spend money to feed the people, and we don't need to spend money to rebuild. But we still receive the gold coins from the countries of the alliance. That's the money for building the watchtower. However, a very important part of the initial investment was to build this railway across the Elven Forest. I used this to invigorate the market economy of Stormwind. In addition, because of the smooth transportation, the specialties of the various regions of Stormwind have also begun to be collected by the kingdom. The kingdom will sell them directly to the maritime merchants of Kull, Tiras and convert them into foreign exchange. So in the latest March and April, the kingdom has a monthly surplus of about 1.2 million gold coins. After Duque finished calculating the accounts, Lang and the ministers of the interior were all on their knees. Unfortunately, due to cultural differences, otherwise they would all write the word convinced to Duque. Duque smiled and looked into the southeast. His gaze seemed to pass through space and fell on the door of darkness thousands of miles away. Sorry, tribe. Our alliance has revived ahead of schedule. What about your tribe? The tribe on the other side of the door of darkness, very bad. At the end of last year, when Kilrog Deadeye's Blood Ring clan and Kargath Bladefist's Shatterhand clan returned to Draenor, they faced a world that was completely out of control. The tribe that had lost its chief once again returned to the chaotic state of the clans. Almost for the entire winter, the clans were fighting each other. Chapter 681. In the First and Second War of the Dark Portal, the Horde was arrogant and seemed to have an endless number of troops. It was largely because of the worsening natural environment of Draenor. The reason why Dan was able to lure so many beastmen to their deaths was very simple, since they were all fighting and killing each other, rather than letting so many fierce beastman tribes fight each other for a smaller and smaller piece of cake. It was better for everyone to go to another planet and fight for a bigger piece of cake. However, with the defeat of the Horde and the fall of the strongest clans in Azeroth, the lack of resources in Draenor seemed to have become less scarce. The Blackrock clan, which was originally the #1 clan, claimed to have 500,000 warriors at their peak. Of course, this was an exaggeration, but there were definitely 300,000 adult orc warriors, and most of them were absolute elites who had experienced the war with the Draenei. Unfortunately, they were weakened by Duque's many tricks, and even the last seed was lost in the sea in the southeast of the Lordaeron continent. The only remaining clan was the Blacktooth clan, which was split from Blackhand's 2 sons, Rend Blackhand and Maim Blackhand. After chasing after Dan, they directly left Orgrim's control. It could be said that the absence of the Blackrock clan had freed up the living space of at least 3 first-rate clans for the entire Horde. Then there was the Warsong clan, which was second only to the Blackrock clan. Unlike the original history, the Warsong clan was thrown into Azeroth early in this war. Now, After South Shore and Silverpine Forest suffered a series of heavy losses, the entire clan was trapped in the Tirisful Glades. Then there was the Frostwolf clan, which was also one of the first-rate clans. They were not much different from the original history, and were directly banished to the Alterac Mountains before the official start of the First War of the Dark Portal. Then there was the Storm Predators and the Blackscar clan, which were at the bottom of the first-rate clans. Finally, there was the Blood Ring clan, the Shattered Palm clan, and the Dragon Maw clan. These were the three first-rate clans that suffered heavy losses, but still returned to Draenor. Unfortunately, due to the significant decline in population and warriors, they had become second-rate clans. All in all, the first-rate clans had nearly 1 million people empty, and this did not include the losses of the second-rate and third-rate clans. If the orc laborers, who had always been ignored by the chiefs, were included. In the 2 wars of the Dark Portal, the Horde had lost more than 2 million people. If anyone checked carefully, they would find that more than 1/3 of the warriors had drowned in the sea. The Alliance had to give Duque a thumbs up. In the tribe, population and warriors were synonymous with territory. Without population and warriors, there would be no territory. There were more vacancies than in history, which led to a new round of reshuffling of power. When Orgrim was still around, none of the clans that stayed in Draenor dared to make a move even though they knew that the chief was still alive. The Orgrim captured, and the clans, of the Wolf clan, of Dragon clan, and Wolf clan. For example, the White Claw clan was exterminated because they sympathized with Durotan and the Frostwolf clan's misfortune. The Thor, Thunderblade, Mocking Skull, Crimson Walker and Chuboneater, who had stayed in Draenor for various reasons and had yet to be sent to Azeroth, gained the greatest advantage in this shuffle. Before winter, they had more than doubled their territory. If it wasn't for the cold of winter, and if they had a little foresight, they might have been able to make Kilrog Deadeye and Kargath Bladefist suffer a grievance. While Draenor was busy fighting, on the eastern kingdoms of Azeroth, the revival of the countries continued. Obviously, the revival of the southern continent was faster than that of the Lordaeron continent. In the north, whether it was the Silverpine Forest that had been burned to the ground or the Warsong orcs in the Tirisful woodlands, Tyreenas could not do anything. He could only hope for the harvest of the fields near Stratholme this year. After all, it was away from the forest, and the orcs would not dare to come out and face the Knights of Lordaeron. Barnil, Felstone, and Maris, these famous grain-producing areas were Lordaeron's last hope. He even hoped that if Deathwing became the king of Alterac, at least Alterac's 10,000 acres of fertile land in Hillsbrad could be temporarily given to Lordaeron. The nearby Dalagen and Stormguard were finally on the right track. But no one could compare to the prosperity of the south. Even if Tyreenas did not want to admit it, he had to admit that there was no other genius in the world like Duque, who could create an independent economic system out of thin air and revive the whole kingdom without spending a single gold coin. Hell, if Kalia was here, I would marry Kalia to Duque even if it was embarrassing. The only good thing is, Daelin didn't seem to benefit from it. Tyreenas had thought of imprisoning Kalia for life because she had embarrassed the Menethil royal family. But when there was a greater benefit, Tyreenas hoped that his dead daughter would crawl out of her grave so that he could sell her again. This was the despicable politics of the royal family. When everyone's attention was on Stormwind, one day in mid-May, Antonidas suddenly received a request for a meeting from Duque. It was not an urgent request, but one that went through diplomatic procedures. The former Dalagen mage, Lady Alucia Barov, personally submitted it to the Foreign Affairs Department of the Kirin Tor Parliament. Even though Antonidas was obsessed with magic experiments, he still received Duque the next day. "Oh, my dear Duque, I thought you had the blood of dwarves in your veins. Railways? Trains? Looks like you're better at dealing with dwarves than you are at being a mage. Alright, what brings you here?" Antonidas hugged Duque with a hint of dissatisfaction and a hint of mockery. "I'm so happy to see you in such good health, Master Antonidas." Duque said politely, then went straight to the point. "Actually, I came this time because I received some unconfirmed news. But this news is too important, so I had to come personally." What kind of news? Antonidas pondered. He knew Duque very well. Even though this young man's plans seemed wild and unconstrained, he had never failed before. From the war with the Horde to the victory ceremony of Lordaeron with the 4 Dragon Kings. Duque's actions always had an obvious purpose. If you ignored his actions, you would be tricked like Tarina's, and don't blame him for not informing you in advance. The warlock King Ghoul, Dan's master, Nizul, has his eyes on the Dalajan Eye. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.